Our dumb, disgusting, boring protagonist, Han Jung-woo, did not have the luxury of growing up in a comfortable environment like his peers. Because of his difficult background, his school years were spent being treated like an invisible man, completely ignored by everyone around him. At the time, he naively believed this harsh treatment was simply due to the immaturity of his classmates, assuming that once he grew up and secured a job at a reputable company, everything would finally turn around. Now an adult, Jung-woo has made it into a major company housed in a grand high-rise building called Ocean Square. However, reality quickly crushes his hopes. While standing in the office hallway holding his work documents, a passing coworker rudely shoulders right past him, without even giving him a glance. The sudden impact catches Jung-woo off guard, causing his neatly organized papers to slip from his grasp and scatter across the floor. Jung-woo immediately stammers out an apology to the back of the retreating coworker, but the man doesn't even bother to stop or acknowledge him. Left completely ignored, Jung-woo is forced to crouch down on the floor to pick up his scattered papers, realizing that his invisible status has followed him into his professional life. As he is kneeling on the floor gathering his documents, two female coworkers walk by, entirely engrossed in their gossip about a recent event. They pay so little attention to their surroundings that one of them steps her sharp high heel directly onto one of Jung-woo's fallen papers. Jung-woo gasps in surprise, as his hard work is literally trampled underfoot, yet the two women continue walking as if nothing happened. Unable to take the disrespect any longer, Jung-woo quickly stands up and calls out to get their attention. The two women stop and turn around, but instead of apologizing, they glare at him with incredibly annoyed and hostile expressions. Intimidated by their intense and judging looks, Jung-woo's confidence instantly evaporates, and he meekly mutters that it is nothing at all. Seeing him back down so easily, the women scoff at him, whispering about how this guy can't even speak up properly. They walk off complaining about why an idiot like him is standing around in such a cramped area with a dumb look on his face. Left standing in the hallway with his crumpled papers, Jung-woo realizes with a heavy heart that nothing has truly changed, and he is still being treated like a ghost. Just as Jung-woo is wallowing in his misery, the distinct sound of footsteps echoes through the office, drawing the immediate attention of the nearby employees who eagerly greet the newcomer as their team leader. The person approaching is none other than team leader Seo Mi-ju. She walks straight over to Jung-woo and asks what exactly he is doing down on the floor. Startled, Jung-woo looks up and is immediately flustered to see his superior standing right before him. Trying to save face, Jung-woo nervously scratches his head and explains that he simply dropped some documents he was printing and was in the middle of gathering them. Instead of scolding him or walking away like the others, Seo Mi-ju looks at the papers scattered across the floor, kneels down, and calmly begins helping him pick them up. Kneeling on the office floor, team leader Seo Mi-ju inspects the scattered pages and asks if they make up the report she requested earlier. Jung-woo nervously confirms that it is indeed the document she mentioned, prompting his superior to sigh in frustration at how selfish their colleagues are, noting that someone should have stepped up to help him. She then instructs Jung-woo to gather the pages and bring them to her desk immediately. Although Jung-woo hesitantly points out that he has not yet had a chance to double-check the draft, Mi-ju dismisses his concerns, insisting that it is fine, and leaving the anxious young man wondering what she plans to do next. Once at her desk, Mi-ju sits down comfortably and begins reviewing the documents, while a visibly tense Jung-woo stands waiting in front of her. After scanning the pages, Mi-ju looks up at him and directly asks if he was truly the one who wrote the document. When Jung-woo nervously confirms that he did, Mi-ju bluntly delivers a crushing blow, stating that his work is absolute garbage. She goes on to criticize every aspect of his effort, explaining that the formatting is a complete disaster and the content is pathetic, even going so far as to say an elementary school student could easily produce a superior draft. Watching his confidence crumble, she asks if he seriously believed she would ever accept such trash. Terrified and desperate, Jung-woo tries to defend himself by explaining that he was actually trying to find a senior colleague to review his draft first, but everyone in the office claimed to be far too busy to help him. Mi-ju quickly shuts down his excuses, telling him to stop worrying about getting a review because she is talking about the absolute basics of office work. She sternly lectures him that these are fundamental skills he should have mastered before entering the workforce, reminding him that the office is not a school. As Jung-woo quietly apologizes, Mi-ju dismisses his regret, remarking that she should have expected this kind of subpar effort from him. She then mutters a sharp, demeaning comment about how this is precisely the problem with hiring high school graduates, a low blow that causes Jung-woo to flinch in deep humiliation and quietly clench his jaw in anger. To make her point brutally clear, Mi-ju grips the paper draft with both hands and tears his hard work completely in half. As the torn pages fall, she lectures him that since it was apparently easier for him to get hired than everyone else, he should be working twice as hard as his peers instead of looking for shortcuts. She expresses her disappointment, stating that he appears to be taking his position for granted. Shoving the torn remnants of his report directly into his chest, she orders him to rewrite the entire document from scratch and have it waiting on her desk before she arrives at work the following morning. When a panicked Jungwoo tries to voice his worry about the impossibly tight deadline, Miju cuts him off, demanding that he ensure it is flawless this time and asking if he clearly understands her instructions. After receiving his harsh punishment, Jungwoo can only swallow his pride and quietly acknowledge his superior's demands. Just as he prepares to leave, another female coworker named Haina approaches the desk to discuss the upcoming meeting with the executives. However, as Haina begins explaining in addition to the meeting agenda, she suddenly stops in shock, noticing that something is seriously wrong with the team leader's outfit. Confused, Miju looks down to see what has caught her colleague's attention. Miju is startled to discover a massive tear running down the leg of her exercise stockings, likely caused when she knelt on the hard office floor earlier to help Jungwoo. Instantly irritated by this proper wardrobe, she decides to project her frustration onto the easiest target available, our resident workplace punching bag, loudly calling out Jungwoo's name just as he is trying to walk away. With no regard for professional boundaries or Jungwoo's dignity, Miju proceeds to slide the ripped exercise stockings off her legs right there at her desk. Holding the discarded thick stockings in her hand, she casually orders Jungwoo to take them and throw them in the trash along with his shredded report. Jungwoo stands frozen, utterly dumbfounded as he is forced to hold his boss's discarded stockings. Showing zero patience, Miju snaps at him to hurry up, complaining that her arm is getting tired from holding them out. To make matters worse, the quiet sound of snickers and whispering echoes from the surrounding cubicles. Standing there as the laughingstock of the office, Jungwoo is crushed by the overwhelming realization that he is being completely ostracized and looked down on by everyone at the company, while Miju simply looks at him with a smug, mocking expression. After tossing the ruined documents and the stockings into the trash bin, Jungwoo returns to his desk, completely seething with quiet rage. He realizes that her brief moment of kindness in the hallway was just a bizarre facade, and he curses his terrible luck under his breath. He clenches his teeth in pure frustration, wondering how he is supposed to succeed when absolutely nobody in this place has bothered to train or teach him a single thing. He feels deeply insulted that team leader Seo Miju chose to humiliate him so ruthlessly in front of the entire department. As he sits there, the memory of her condescendingly handing over her exercise stockings plays over and over in his mind, fueling his building resentment. He thinks about how, if he truly had his way, he would make her pay for this disrespect. Finally reaching his absolute breaking point, Jungwoo lets his pent-up fury take over, resulting in a chaotic outburst where papers are sent flying through the air as a startled scream echoes across the office. In the depths of his intense frustration, Jungwoo lets his mind drift into a vivid daydream where he exacts his ultimate revenge on his arrogant boss. In this wild fantasy, he subjects team leader Seo Miju to a grueling, high-intensity training session right in the office. In his imagination, she is completely overwhelmed, breathlessly demanding to know why she should have to endure this kind of conditioning session and questioning if she looks like someone he can just push around. As she desperately calls out his name and begs to talk things out, the fantasy version of Jungwoo remains completely relentless. He firmly grips her hands and prepares to initiate a strenuous full-body training sesh, ignoring her frantic apologies as she struggles to keep up with the pacing of his demanding self-training routine. Miju continues to gasp in sheer shock as Jungwoo's imaginary workout pushes her to her absolute limits. Shocked that he would perform such high-intensity fitness conditioning right in the workplace, she finds herself completely at his mercy. To keep her from disrupting the office, the daydream version of Jungwoo swiftly silences her by stuffing the exercise stocking into her mouth. He tells her that this is direct payback for all the nonsense she spewed earlier, wishing for her to taste the exact same humiliation he had to suffer. With total dominance, he drives the conditioning session to its peak, completely breaking her pride in his mind. Of course, reality quickly pulls Jungwoo out of his daydream, and he lets out a heavy sigh as he sits back in his quiet office chair. He reflects on how much he would love to actually do that, but immediately realizes it is completely out of the question. Getting hired at a prestigious company like this was incredibly difficult for him, and quitting just because the job is miserable is a luxury he simply cannot afford. Knowing that someone of his background could normally never dream of working here, he acknowledges that he only got the job out of sheer luck. With a mountain of credit card debt and ongoing expenses to pay off, this poor idiot has no choice but to stick it out, typing away on his keyboard with the naive hope that things will eventually get better. As the clock on the wall ticks past 9, Jungwoo's stomach begins to growl, prompting him to take a quick break and hit the local convenience store for a bite to eat. Stepping out into the cool night air, he lets out a heavy sigh, fully resigned to the fact that he is not going home tonight since he has to pull an all-nighter to finish rewriting the entire report. While drinking a cold beverage outside the convenience store to clear his head, Jung-woo suddenly hears voices nearby. He lowers his drink and glances down the street, only to spot a group of people standing outside a nearby establishment. As he looks closer, his eyes widen in realization as he recognizes some very familiar faces. Outside a restaurant, Jung-woo's co-workers stand together chatting in high spirits. A male colleague warmly praises team leader Seo Miju for her hard work, to which she modestly replies that everyone was simply having a great time. The colleague expresses his appreciation for the team-building dinner, noting how pleasant it is to finally gather after such a long time. Miju readily agrees, adding that things had been quite hectic for a while due to human resources, though she had personally wanted to host this gathering much sooner. Watching this scene unfold from a distance, Jung-woo is frozen in absolute disbelief. He realizes with a sinking heart that the entire department has gone out for a team-building dinner, a social event he was deliberately excluded from and never told about. His pain only deepens when he overhears Miju casually remarking to the group that if they hadn't been burdened with a certain bad apple, they probably would have organized this dinner much sooner. One of the female co-workers voices a slight hesitation, asking if it is truly safe for them to continue excluding Jung-woo, wondering if he might report their toxic behavior to the higher-ups. Her concerns are immediately dismissed by a male colleague, who laughs mockingly and asks if anyone honestly thinks Jung-woo has the courage to do such a thing. The man arrogantly suggests that Jung-woo should go ahead and report them if he wants, arguing that management would never take his side anyway and likely wants the poor guy to resign as quickly as possible. The male colleague chuckles, noting how much Miju seems to have it out for Jung-woo. Showing her true venomous colors, Miju coldly declares that she utterly despises people who do not know their place. She sneers that if it weren't for the special high school graduate hiring program, Jung-woo would never have even set foot in this company, questioning how someone like him dares to act as their equal. She goes on to mock his background as an orphan, stating that they belong to an entirely different social class than unsophisticated trash like him. She instructs the group that there is absolutely no need to treat him with kindness, urging them to continue isolating him and promising to personally cover for them. The male colleague nods in agreement, smugly suggesting that if Jung-woo can take a hint, he will eventually quit the job on his own, while the other female co-worker giggles and admits she would be thrilled to never see him again soon. Hidden in the shadows, Jung-woo listens to every hateful word, realizing with absolute clarity that the team leader herself was the mastermind behind all the bullying and ostracization he suffered from day one. Shaking with pure rage, he crushes the metal can in his hand, cursing their cruelty and wondering how these people can treat another human being like this without a shred of shame. As his fury reaches its boiling point, a glowing blue digital screen suddenly materializes in the air right before his eyes. The holographic prompt states that their disregard has officially reached its limit. Jung-woo's eyes widen in sheer bewilderment as a second notification flashes, declaring that he has officially awakened as an outsider. Left completely dumbfounded, Jung-woo can only stare at the floating interface, wondering what on earth this mysterious system is. Still reeling from the shock of his sudden awakening, Jung-woo stares at the glowing screen declaring his new status as an outsider. Before he can even begin to process what this means, a massive surge of energy courses through him, causing him to let out a loud, panicked scream that echoes down the street. The sudden outburst instantly startles his nearby coworkers, who spin around in confusion, looking for the source of the noise. As the group looks around the empty street, they murmur about the strange noise, admitting that it completely caught them off guard. Nearby, Jung-woo's crushed aluminum can clatters to the ground, drawing their attention. One of his colleagues asks if anyone else just heard a voice, prompting Jung-woo to quickly cover his mouth in shock. As his own footsteps echo softly on the pavement, he realizes something impossible is happening. In his panic, Jung-woo finds himself standing close to Seo Miju, nearly brushing shoulders with his hostile boss. He waits for her to lash out, but she simply glances around, casually remarking to the others that there must be a drunkard wandering nearby. Jung-woo's mind is absolutely blown as he realizes that she is looking directly in his direction but cannot see him at all. One of the male co-workers suggests that since everyone has had a bit too much to drink, it is probably time for them to head home. Miju agrees, though she mentions that she left something back at the office and needs to stop by to retrieve it first. As she turns and walks right past him, another digital notification screen flashes before Jung-woo, confirming that his level 1 outsider mode has been activated, and he is indeed completely invisible. Seeing the undeniable proof of his new power, Jung-woo's fear instantly melts away, replaced by a quiet, cunning grin. Meanwhile, a slightly tipsy Miju stumbles back into the quiet office building. As she walks down the dimly lit hallway, she is suddenly startled when another woman calls out her name. Miju turns to see her fellow superior, team leader Song Chaewon, standing in the corridor. Chaewon mentions that she assumed Miju had already left work for the night, prompting Miju to explain that she was just about to, before asking Chaewon what she is still doing here. Chaewon smiles and explains that she had some leftover work to take care of, but is finally ready to head home as well. After bidding farewell to her fellow team leader, Seo Miju heads back down the hallway, letting out an annoyed click of her tongue. She slides open the door to her department's office, only to find the entire room bathed in pitch darkness. Stepping inside, she wonders what on earth Jungwoo is doing sitting in the dark, confidently assuming there is no way the slacker would have dared to go home. She looks around the dim room, calling out his name into the empty space. Realizing there is no response, Miju sighs in deep frustration, muttering that if someone has absolutely no natural talent, they should at least try to make up for it with sheer effort. Her annoyance quickly flares into anger as she realizes the young man has apparently skipped out on his overtime work, cursing his name under her breath for leaving so early. Little does she know, Jungwoo has followed her every single step of the way, standing just inches from her, in his newly active, completely invisible state. He watches her rage with a smug grin, completely amazed that she still has not noticed his presence at all. Realizing that he has indeed been blessed with an incredible, supernatural power, Jungwoo decides that this is the perfect tool to pay back every single ounce of disrespect, bullying, and disdain his haughty co-workers have shown him. Positioning himself directly behind his completely oblivious boss, Jungwoo decides to put his new abilities to the test. Without warning, his invisible hands reach out, initiating a sudden and endurance training session. Miju gasps in absolute shock, frozen in place as she feels a very real shock. She looks down in utter confusion, unable to comprehend what is happening as she experiences a high-intensity conditioning session with no visible trainer in sight. Deeply unsettled, Miju shivers in the dark office, gasping as she feels a bizarre feeling that makes her feel like someone is actively starting to train her. The phantom hands send a jolt of panic through her, causing her to let out a sharp, startled scream. Just as she cries out, team leader Song Chaewon, who was still nearby in the hallway, steps into the dark room and calls out Miju's name, asking what she is doing. Trying to hide her intense fluster, Miju quickly composes herself and asks Chaewon if she hadn't already gone home. Chaewon explains that she actually stayed because there was something specific she wanted to discuss. While they face each other, Miju's mind frantically races, desperately trying to make sense of the strange feeling she felt pressing against her head just moments earlier. Chaewon calmly brings up the business at hand, asking Miju if the presentation that Team 3 is preparing for tomorrow is going smoothly. Miju defensively confirms that everything is on track, but she immediately bristles, asking why the leader of Team 1 is suddenly showing so much interest in her team's projects. While Miju is distracted by the conversation, Jungwoo decides to take advantage of his invisible state once again. Annoyed that Chaewon chose this exact moment to butt in on his fun, he slips right back behind Miju and initiates another silent, firm grip training session. Miju squeaks in absolute terror, utterly horrified to realize that she is still feeling these highly sussy things while standing right in front of her colleague. Oblivious to the intense struggle Miju is experiencing, Chaewon pleads with her to stop being so cold, reminding her that they are all part of the same sales department and that her interest is only natural. Miju struggles to keep her voice steady, stammering out that the presentation preparations are flawless and suggesting that Chaewon simply wait until tomorrow to hear the full details. She lets out a tense, forced laugh to hide her mounting panic. As Miju desperately tries to maintain her professional facade, the invisible Jungwoo intensifies his conditioning session, catching her firmly from behind. Miju is internally screaming, frantically wondering what kind of invisible force is taking liberties with her right under her colleague's nose. Chaewon continues the conversation, asking if Miju is still harboring a grudge over their past conflict. She explains that the outcome was entirely beyond her control, as it was a direct order from the head of the department. Although she understands why Miju is upset that Chaewon secured the specific promotional item Miju wanted, she gently advises that they should keep their personal and professional lives separate. Standing directly behind them, the invisible Jungwoo absorbs this juicy gossip, realizing there is some major bad blood between the two superiors. He quietly chuckles to himself, thinking that given Miju's naturally terrible personality, it is completely expected that she would be constantly fighting with the other team leaders. Continuing her inquiries, team leader Chaewon asks if the Team 3 employee who was working so late was Jungwoo. She wonders why he was left organizing the files until such an ungodly hour, pointing out that such an important task shouldn't blindly be dumped onto their youngest, most inexperienced employee. In his invisible state, Jungwoo is shocked to realize that his malicious boss never mentioned any of this to him. Miju quickly puts on a fake, cheerful front, claiming that she had actually prepared everything in advance, and that Jungwoo had simply volunteered to do the work because he wanted to practice his skills. To deflect the attention away from herself, Miju takes a malicious jab at Chaewon, laughing and suggesting that since Chaewon only secured her current position thanks to outside help, she must suffer from a severe ability complex. Hearing her lie so blatantly about forcing him to do all that exhausting work, Jungwoo's blood completely boils with rage. Deciding to punish this terrible woman for her dishonesty, he channels his anger into a sudden, high-intensity wholesome training session, delivering a powerful strike to her head. The unexpected blow sends Miju screaming in pain as she crashes heavily onto the office floor, completely startling Chaewon, who frantically calls out her name in shock. Chaewon rushes over to the sprawled-out Miju, desperately asking if she is all right and what on earth is wrong with her. Panting on her hands and knees in the dark, Miju is utterly terrified and bewildered, wondering what invisible force is repeatedly attacking her. As Chaewon leans in to inspect her disheveled state, she lets out a heavy, disappointed sigh. Chaewon flatly asks Miju if she is completely drunk, lecturing her that she should have kept her drinking under control. She scolds her counterpart for drinking to the point of losing all self-control, and questions why she would even bother returning to the workplace in such an embarrassing state. Miju can only stammer in confusion, unable to explain the invisible assault without sounding completely insane. Standing nearby, the invisible Jungwoo watches the spectacle with immense satisfaction. Chaewon continues her lecture, pointing out how shameful it is that their youngest employee is staying late to finish his work diligently, while their team leader is stumbling around the office. Realizing that it is completely impossible to have a logical conversation with her drunken colleague, Chaewon bids Miju a cold farewell and leaves, shutting the door behind her and leaving a thoroughly dazed, shivering Miju alone in the dark. Once the meddlesome colleague has finally departed, Miju lets out a weary sigh, completely exhausted by the bizarre events of the evening. Hidden in the darkness, Jungwoo watches her with a satisfied, vengeful grin. He decides that now is the perfect opportunity to address her terrible, toxic personality, loosening his tie as he prepares to teach his arrogant boss a lesson she will never forget. Still feeling extremely tipsy, Miju stumbles slightly, quietly admitting to herself that she must be far more intoxicated than she realized. Anxious to escape the eerie office, she hurries to the main glass exit and grabs the handle, but to her absolute horror, the door refuses to budge. Shaking the handle in a panic, she desperately wonders why the door is suddenly locked tight, finding it completely impossible that such a bizarre malfunction could happen. Unbeknownst to her, the invisible Jungwoo is standing right beside the entrance, easily holding the door shut to completely trap her inside. Terrified and shivering on the floor, Miju pulls out her phone to search for the security room's number to call for help. Little does she know, the true nightmare is only just beginning. Suddenly, she flinches in shock as she feels a cold, mysterious energy drink dripping onto her mouth and fingers. Staring in utter confusion at the energy on her hand, she desperately tries to rationalize what is happening to her, entirely unaware that the invisible Jungwoo is standing directly over her, preparing her into a conditioning session. Deciding to target her arrogant mouth first, Jungwoo initiates a highly demanding endurance training session. He chuckles inwardly as he watches her struggle, reminding her in his thoughts of how she constantly used those very mouths to boss him around, criticize his work, and declare him completely hopeless. With absolute control over the situation, he mockingly wonders how it feels to have those rude behaviors subjected to his intense conditioning workshop, leaving the arrogant team leader utterly helpless in the dark. Jungwoo begrudgingly admits that despite her incredibly toxic and rude personality, his boss, Seo Miju, actually possesses an attractive appearance and a notable gym physique. He quietly reflects to himself that she is quite a beautiful woman whenever she manages to keep her mouth shut. On top of her looks, her professional capabilities are undeniably outstanding, which explains how she managed to secure a promotion to team leader at such a young age. This combination of appeal and career success makes her highly popular in the office, and Jungwoo notes that a significant number of men in the company openly admire her as she walks down the hallways. However, the narrative shifts back to the immediate crisis inside the dark office. While Jungwoo is in the middle of his stealthy activities, his eyes suddenly widen in pure shock as a glowing digital interface flashes directly in front of his face. The blue holographic prompt delivers some incredibly terrible timing, announcing that the time limit for his outsider mode has officially been reached and the invisibility power is about to end. This unexpected warning leaves the panicked protagonist in a state of absolute horror, realizing the utter disaster that would unfold if he is discovered. Fortunately, the lucky guy manages to pull back just as the invisibility completely fades away. Looking down, He sees team leader Seo Miju collapsed on the floor, panting heavily, and completely disheveled from the sheer intensity of his rigorous conditioning session. The sweat on the floor and her heels bears the evidence of the highly demanding training she just endured. Jungwoo lets out a shaky sigh of relief, quietly noting how incredibly close he came to getting caught red-handed. Standing over her, he observes her flushed, unresponsive state and wonders if the dramatic intensity of the fitness session actually caused the haughty team leader to faint right there on the spot. He nervously gulps, desperately hoping that she was too overwhelmed to notice his presence during the entire ordeal. The scene transitions to the following morning as a bright, sunny day begins at the Grand Ocean Square high-rise. Inside the busy office, the daily hustle is already in full swing as employees exchange their standard morning greetings. Walking through the department, Jungwoo notices a group of female coworkers huddled together, whispering and complaining about how annoying he is, likely still holding on to their petty biases. However, instead of letting their toxicity get to him, Jungwoo feels a quiet sense of relief, realizing from their ordinary gossiping that no strange stories or rumors about his activities have started circulating around the office. Just then, another female colleague passes right in front of him, but this time, Jungwoo remains calm and composed, casually offering a polite morning greeting as he walks past without letting his past anxieties hold him back. While Jungwoo is attempting to settle into his morning routine, a sharp, commanding voice suddenly cuts through the office chatter, calling out his name. Startled by the sudden summons, the nervous young man quickly responds in a fluster, shouting out his confirmation. He turns to find his formidable boss, team leader Seo Miju, standing nearby. Without offering any explanation, she coldly orders him to follow her straight to the meeting room. As she turns on her heel and walks away, a heavy wave of dread washes over the anxious protagonist. His mind races as he nervously tells himself there is absolutely no way she could have discovered his actions from the night before. Still, the poor idiot's heart hammers against his ribs as he follows her down the hallway, watching her march purposefully toward their destination. Reaching the meeting room door, Jungwoo hesitatingly turns the handle and steps inside the quiet space. Trying to gauge the situation, he tentatively calls out to his team leader. Miju keeps her back turned for a moment, coldly questioning what he thinks he is doing, especially since it is the very first thing in the morning. As Jungwoo steps closer, sweating profusely and trying to maintain his professional composure, Miju suddenly spins around with intense anger flashing in her eyes. Before the clueless guy can even react, she aggressively reaches out and firmly snatches him by his necktie. Completely caught off guard by the sudden contact, Jungwoo freezes in sheer shock. His furious superior glares at him with pure hatred, loudly calling him an absolute disgusting. Gripping his tie with an iron fist, she forcefully pulls him down toward her, leaving our completely startled protagonist staring with wide, terrified eyes as he wonders if his secret is officially out. The story jumps back to 1 hour prior to the confrontation, showing the Grand Ocean Square building bathed in the morning light. Haina, our bubbly but slightly oblivious colleague, arrives early for work and steps into the quiet department. She is immediately surprised to spot team leader Seo Miju already standing near her desk, looking unusually quiet. Greeting her superior, Haina comments on how exceptionally early she is, to which Miju turns around with a rather tired expression and calmly explains that she simply woke up early today. When Haina playfully replies that she is highly motivated to work hard and support her superior, Miju dryly tells her to stop with the cheap flattery. As they converse, Haina's sharp eyes narrow in suspicion as she looks closer at her boss. She notices with quiet astonishment that Miju is wearing the exact same dress from the previous day, a highly unusual choice for the normally pristine team leader. Unbeknownst to Haina, this stubborn boss is deeply distracted, trying to piece together the highly bizarre circumstances of her morning. From Miju's perspective, the start of her day makes absolutely no sense. She remembers that when she finally opened her eyes earlier that morning, she was completely shocked to find herself already at her office desk, having fallen asleep resting on her arms. Waking up in a groggy state, she had sat up abruptly in sheer panic, frantically questioning what was going on. As she desperately tries to recall the chaotic events of the previous night, a flood of vivid, highly unsettling memories rushes back. She realizes that those incredibly weird and intense events from yesterday were indeed real, though she finds herself thoroughly confused, since all of her clothes are still on her body. Touching her muscle hand to inspect herself, she struggles to believe that those spectral occurrences actually happened in reality. Yet, her body still remembers the absolute physical toll of the night. She vividly recalls being caught in the dark office, trapped against her desk, as an invisible force subjected her to an incredibly relentless, high-intensity training session. She remembers the invisible hands initiating a highly demanding full-body training sesh, pushing her endurance to its absolute limits as her body worked up an intense sweat. In her hazy memories, she was completely at the mercy of this phantom workout, experiencing a rigorous conditioning session that left her entirely breathless, shivering, and physically spent. Recalling the overwhelming intensity of that non-stop fitness conditioning, Miju is left trembling in the morning light, deeply unsettled by the extreme training routine that left her body thoroughly exhausted before she finally fainted. Returning to the high-stakes confrontation in the meeting room, team leader Seo Miju holds Jungwoo tightly by his necktie. Her mind is in absolute chaos as she frantically tries to determine if the intense experiences from the night before were actually real or if it was all just a wild, drunken dream. To find the answer to this puzzling mystery, she decides she must demand absolute honesty from her subordinate. Jungwoo, sweating profusely and clearly intimidated by her aggressive posture, stammers out, asking why on earth she is doing this to him. Miju quickly cuts to the chase, demanding to know if he was indeed the one who stayed back in the office late yesterday. After nervously gulping down his panic, our clever protagonist confirms that he was indeed working late. He explains that since she assigned him so much work, he had no choice but to pull overtime, calmly asking if there is a problem. Miju narrows her eyes, explaining that she had actually returned to the office briefly last night to take care of some business, but found the place completely empty. She claims she only managed to finish half of her work before having to rush home due to an unexpected emergency. As she studies his reaction, Miju realizes that the young man does not appear to be lying at all. She reflects on how she had already checked the building's security cameras earlier that morning, confirming that Jungwoo had left the premises as soon as her department's after-party ended and never returned. This leaves her highly frustrated, clenching her teeth as she realizes her suspicions might be entirely off base. Finding herself completely unable to ask him such a bizarre and highly embarrassing question about her spectral trainer, Miju grips his tie even tighter. Grasping at straws, she loudly demands to know if he saw anyone else behaving suspiciously near their workplace yesterday. Jungwoo quickly shakes his head, claiming he saw absolutely no one. Letting out a heavy, disappointed sigh, Miju finally releases her grip on his tie and concedes that she must have simply misunderstood the situation. She coldly dismisses him, telling him he is free to leave, which Jungwoo politely acknowledges before turning to make his exit. Once his back is turned to his hostile boss, a smug, triumphant grin spreads across Jungwoo's face. He quietly mocks his foolish superior, amused that she actually believed his simple alibi and thinking how absurd it was for her to try and intimidate him. However, his brief moment of victory is cut short the moment he slides the door open. He immediately freezes in surprise as he bumps directly into Haina, who was lingering nervously in the hallway. Haina explains that she happened to hear some incredibly loud and aggressive noises while passing by the room, anxiously asking if something bad had happened between them. Before a nervous Jungwoo can even stammer out a response, Miju quickly steps in to save face, plastering a fake, cheerful smile across her face as she assures Haina that absolutely nothing is wrong. She casually claims she was merely questioning Jungwoo about his progress on the report she requested. To make the cover story convincing, she asks Jungwoo where the physical draft is since he was supposed to bring it to her, catching the young man completely off guard as he suddenly realizes he needs to present the revised document immediately. An abrupt flashback reveals that last night, while lying comfortably in bed and basking in the excitement of his invisible revenge, our resident dumbass completely forgot to actually rewrite his assigned report. Cut back to the present meeting room, where team leader Seo Miju stares at him in sheer disbelief, realizing that he has not finished the assignment. Jungwoo can only sweat profusely, stammering as he tries to find a plausible explanation. Unfortunately for him, Miju's patience evaporates instantly. Her furious scream echoes loudly through the busy office, startling all of his nearby colleagues. Standing aggressively in front of him, she berates him in public, demanding to know if his job is some kind of joke to him. She lectures him that since he was officially accepted into the company, he has no right to act like a reckless part-timer who can just skip out on his duties. She continues her loud tirade, questioning if he possesses any sense of responsibility and pointing out how unacceptable it is to leave his tasks unfinished simply because he claims to be busy. With Haina standing awkwardly beside them, a humiliated Jungwoo bows his head and stammers out a weak apology. This only irritates Miju further, who snaps that she is sick of hearing his constant, useless apologies. She sternly commands him to remain focused, condescendingly telling him that the company only keeps him around because they are being incredibly lenient and warning him that no other workplace would ever tolerate such subpar behavior. Jungwoo grinds his teeth in silent humiliation, forced to swallow his pride once again. Crossing her arms, Miju wonders aloud how she can possibly trust someone who behaves like this. Fortunately for Jungwoo, Haena intervenes to save him from further public embarrassment, nervously reminding the team leader that their upcoming meeting rehearsal is about to start. Realizing she is running late, Miju quickly shifts her focus, giving Jungwoo a strict, final warning to finish the report and submit it to her desk before noon. To deliver one last painful jab to his pride, she orders him to stop showing everyone in the department how lacking he is compared to his peers. Grinding his teeth and bowing his head, the defeated protagonist can only quietly accept her terms. As Miju's footsteps fade down the hallway, Jungwoo stands completely frozen, his entire body shaking with pure, unbridled rage. He silently curses her name over and over in his mind, vowing that he will make her pay dearly for this public humiliation. Shortly after, the focus shifts to the executive presentation room inside Ocean Square. Now, dressed in a sleek blue jacket, team leader Seo Miju looks over her paperwork, noting with a sigh that the messy quality of the report is typical of Han Jungwoo's sloppy work after all. However, she quickly tells herself to stop complicating things with bizarre theories, firmly deciding that the strange events from the previous night were simply a wild dream caused by her heavy drinking. Pushing her personal thoughts aside to focus on the task at hand, she stands confidently at the podium to address the room. Welcoming her colleagues, she thanks everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to attend, formally announcing that Recruitment Team 3 will now present their strategic plans for the second half of the year, while her rival, team leader Song Chae-won, watches closely from the audience. As the presentation proceeds inside the executive meeting room, some colleagues quietly whisper to one another, wondering where on earth Han Jungwoo has disappeared to. Meanwhile, team leader Seo Miju continues her pitch, explaining how their company's distribution channels allow them to utilize products that competitors cannot access. However, she is suddenly interrupted by her rival, team leader Song Chae-won. Pointing out a potential issue in the slides, Chae-won questions whether those brands could truly withstand the pressure of utilizing 400 million on each brand every season as stated in the PowerPoint. Quickly trying to regain her footing, Miju confidently explains that, even if a brand is famous nationwide, those factors alone cannot guarantee success. Standing at the podium, she proudly notes that they possess their own unique weapon, which is the valuable business network they have built up over the past 30 years. But just as she is about to finish her sentence, Miju suddenly gasps in shock, her face turning bright red as she flinches at the podium. Seeing her unusual reaction, a puzzled Chae-won asks if she is all right. Miju quickly tries to cover her immense fluster, embarrassedly apologizing and claiming that her throat simply got a bit stuffy. Chae-won politely advises her to drink some water to clear her throat, which Miju shakily acknowledges as she tries to compose herself. In her mind, Miju is absolutely panicking. She desperately tells herself that there is no way this can possibly be happening, having firmly convinced herself that the terrifying events from the previous night were just a drunken dream. However, she is instantly forced to face reality as she feels the distinct, highly proper touch of phantom hands slipping past her defenses to initiate a highly intensive, unexpected workplace conditioning session. To her absolute horror, the completely invisible Jungwoo has materialized directly behind her at the podium, wearing a smug, vengeful grin. He mockingly reminds her of her own words about how incredibly important today's executive meeting was, playfully wondering what would happen if her body reached its absolute physical training limits and she completely collapsed in front of everyone. With zero regard for the professional setting, our cheeky invisible trainer aggressively accelerates the full-body training sesh, initiating a highly demanding conditioning session and a relentless hand endurance workout. Poor Miju is pushed to her absolute limits, her face blushing furiously as she grips the podium for dear life. She struggles desperately to hold back her breathless gasps and maintain her professional facade, completely at the mercy of this silent, high-intensity workplace fitness routine, while the entire room watches her, entirely oblivious to the invisible workout occurring right before their eyes. During her high-stakes presentation, team leader Seo Miju suddenly lets out a sharp gasp, her face flushing a deep crimson as she desperately tries to keep her voice under control. Her highly visible distress immediately startles the audience, prompting her rival, Song Chae-won, to call out her name in concern. Snapping out of her daze with a panicked response, Miju is met with a cold look from Chae-won, who asks why she is suddenly zoning out and instructs her to continue. Trying to hide her overwhelming embarrassment, Miju quickly nods and tries to regain her focus. However, keeping her composure is proving to be an impossible task. Miju realizes with absolute horror that the bizarre spectral training from last night is indeed happening again right now. As her body shivers and twitches from the intense training, she frantically wonders what on earth she should do. Sensing her inner panic, the invisible Jungwoo positions himself right behind her, smugly thinking that if she stops the presentation now, everyone in the room will surely think she has completely lost her mind. Realizing that enduring this relentless conditioning session is her only viable option, Miju clenches her teeth and bravely announces to the room that she will continue, shakily attempting to explain their company's unique business weapon. But our cheeky invisible trainer has no intention of making it easy for her. Amused by her stubbornness, Jungwoo decides to step up the intensity of the workout, initiating a highly targeted fitness conditioning session. Miju squeaks internally as she feels his training, sending a jolt of shock through her body. Struggling to read her notes, she stammers out a few incoherent words about their 30-year distribution network. She feels absolutely revolted as the training escalates, with the invisible hands treating her muscles like a dumbbell. To make matters worse, Jungwoo pushes her endurance to its absolute limits by introducing a highly risky yoga workout from behind. Despite her body screaming from the sheer exhaustion of the non-stop fitness routine, Miju desperately tells herself that she must bear the training until the very end. Once the presentation finally wraps up, the surrounding male colleagues gather in the hallway, whispering among themselves about how incredibly strange and oddly flustered team leader Miju behaved during the meeting. Just then, Miju stumbles out into the corridor, looking completely spent, red-faced, and heavily disheveled. Hana spots her and tries to offer a friendly congratulations on her presentation, but a frantic Miju cuts her off mid-sentence, claiming she has to leave immediately as she rushes past. Hana is left standing there completely bewildered by her boss's bizarre, hasty exit. Seeking a private place to recover from the grueling, high-intensity workplace fitness routine, Miju locks herself inside a stall in the women's room, letting out a loud cry of pure frustration at the absolute nightmare she just endured. Now safe inside the stall, team leader Seo Miju sits, her face boiling with pure frustration as she silently reflects on how much she absolutely hates this situation. She feels deeply humiliated, questioning why on earth she had to suffer through such a grueling ordeal in front of all her colleagues. Shivering and panting from the residual effects of her previous workout, she struggles to calm her racing heart. Unable to shake off the intense training left by her invisible trainer, Miju reluctantly starts practicing her wrist curls. But her attempt to wind down is suddenly interrupted by a familiar, smug presence. From the shadows of the stall, the invisible Jungwoo reappears with a wide grin, mockingly pointing out that since she is in this state because of him, he should probably take full responsibility and finish what they started. To her absolute shock, the relentless trainer has followed her directly into the stall. Before the startled team leader can even react, Jungwoo immediately initiates another high-intensity full-body training sesh right there. Outside the room, two female employees casually stroll by, completely oblivious to the dramatic events unfolding inside. Meanwhile, deep within her stall, team leader Seo Miju is pushed to her absolute limits. Her body shakes and trembles uncontrollably as she endures a relentless, high-intensity endurance training session. Standing triumphantly behind her, our cheeky, invisible protagonist lets out a quiet chuckle. He silently advises her to keep the painful consequences of messing with him firmly in mind, making it clear that he will no longer tolerate her disrespectful behavior. Satisfied with this incredibly successful workout, Jungwoo slides open the stall door and casually steps out, leaving a completely dazed and trembling Miju to recover on her own. With a smug grin plastered across his face, Jungwoo quietly exits the room and walks back down the hallway toward his desk, thoroughly pleased with how effectively his newly awakened powers allowed him to pay her back. However, the stall is not as empty as he assumed. Just moments after the door shuts, the door of an adjacent stall slowly creaks open. Hana cautiously peeks out from hiding, her eyes wide with absolute, jaw-dropping shock. Blushing furiously and sweating from the sheer tension of what she just witnessed, she stands frozen in the middle of the room. She can only whisper his name, Han Jungwoo, in complete and utter disbelief, realizing that her seemingly invisible, low-ranking colleague is somehow the mastermind behind the team leader's bizarre state. Under the glow of a street lamp on a quiet night, Han Jungwoo walks down the pavement as the grand reality of his situation fully sinks in. He realizes with absolute clarity that his outsider power is indeed real. He reflects on his memories, vividly recalling how he can subject his arrogant boss to highly demanding, high-intensity conditioning sessions in various places, without ever having to worry about getting caught by anyone. In his mind, he is certain that after those grueling full-body training sessions, even his stubborn superior will remain completely quiet for a while. Our smug protagonist smiles to himself, realizing that this newly discovered power will not only grant him the ultimate revenge, but might even allow him to completely rewrite his entire destiny. Standing proudly outside the Ocean Square high-rise under a starry night sky, he confidently tells himself that his daily life is going to be incredibly entertaining from now on. The next day, as he strolls through the hallway, whistling a cheerful tune, he is completely oblivious to the fact that Haina is quietly hiding behind a corner, watching his every move with an intense, deeply suspicious gaze. Back at his desk inside the department, Jung-woo leans back in his chair, feeling thoroughly exhausted. He reflects on how he has spent a significant amount of his free time lately, testing the limits of his special ability, leading him to discover a few highly important rules. Experimenting in his apartment after work, he realized that his level 1 outsider mode currently has a strict limit of 2 hours per activation, automatically shutting down once the time limit is reached, followed by a necessary cooldown period before he can utilize the invisibility again. Staring at his computer screen, which displays his level 1 status, Jung-woo contemplates how he might go about developing his special gift further. He realizes that while upgrading his power is certainly possible, he has absolutely no idea how to actually trigger a level up, wondering if he needs to fulfill some highly specific hidden conditions first. As he rubs his neck and thinks back, he remembers that his toxic boss, Seo Mi-ju, was actively belittling him right when his outsider ability first awakened. Suddenly, a quiet realization hits him, and he notices that her desk has been completely silent all morning. Turning around to his cubicle neighbor, Manager Oh, Jung-woo politely inquires if the team leader is absent today. Manager Oh simply turns around, offering a knowing, slightly amused smirk in response. Looking at his smug colleague, Jung-woo can only think what an absolute douchebag Manager Oh is, realizing he should have expected nothing less from one of team leader Seo Mi-ju's loyal minions. Grinding his teeth in quiet frustration, our protagonist reflects on the harsh reality of his situation, realizing that this toxic office is actually packed with people he needs to exact his revenge on. He firmly resolves that when the perfect opportunity finally presents itself, he will make every single one of them pay. But his dark thoughts are suddenly interrupted when Haina approaches his cubicle from behind. Standing near his desk, she quietly informs him that their team leader is actually taking the day off today because she is apparently not feeling very well. Jung-woo is caught off guard, stammering out a quick acknowledgement while privately wondering if Mi-ju's sudden illness is a direct result of the incredibly rigorous conditioning session he subjected her to yesterday. Recovering his composure, he politely thanks Haina for sharing the update, to which she kindly tells him not to mention it. Just as he expects her to walk away, Haina calls out his name once more. When Jung-woo looks up, she warmly asks if she can speak with him privately for a brief moment. The scene transitions to the office break room, where the distinct sound of a vending machine dispensing a cold can of soda echoes through the quiet room. Jung-woo is slightly confused, asking if she brought him here just to buy him a drink. Kneeling down to retrieve the cans, Haina explains that she simply wanted him to take a much-needed break, handing him the cold beverage while noting that she also wanted to share some important advice with him. As Jung-woo politely thanks her, Haina delivers a sober warning, explaining that even with the team leader absent today, the other toxic employees in the department are still going to try and mistreat him. Seeing his quiet reaction, she reassures him, warmly telling him that if he ever runs into any difficulties or finds himself struggling with a task, he should always feel free to come and ask her for help. Placing a gentle, supportive hand on his chest, she looks him in the eye with a warm smile and encourages him to stay strong. After offering her warm words of encouragement, Manager Yang Haina leans in surprisingly close, tapping a gentle finger against Han Jung-woo's chest, and leaving our easily flustered protagonist completely frozen in place. Standing in the break room with his drink, Jung-woo's mind races as he recalls a helpful chat message she sent him earlier in the day. Back then, Haina had messaged him to explain that he should try to use professional business language as much as possible in his reports, even going out of her way to attach a fully revised document complete with a cute cheering sticker. Jung-woo realizes with a humbler perspective that he had mistakenly categorized Haina as just another one of team leader Seo Mi-ju's loyal minions, when in reality, she was probably just trying to survive the toxic environment by going along with the crowd. Sitting at his desk and reviewing her incredibly thorough edits, this grateful dumbass is genuinely impressed by her kindness, taking a slow sip of his soda as a newfound sense of respect for his colleague begins to grow. With his work finished early thanks to her tutoring, Jung-woo is seen walking down the office hallway with his bag, whistling a cheerful tune as he celebrates the rare luxury of leaving work exactly on time. He eagerly tells himself that he is going to crack open a cold beer the moment he gets home, but his joyful exit is suddenly interrupted when he spots Haina waiting by the elevator. Deciding to be polite, Jung-woo calls out to Manager Yang, catching her attention as she turns around in surprise. After confirming that he is indeed heading home, Jung-woo bows respectfully and expresses his deep gratitude, explaining that he was only able to finish his tasks on time because of her generous assistance. Haina offers a soft, pleased smile, clearly happy to see her junior colleague showing such sincere appreciation. Curious about his plans, Haina asks if he is heading straight back to his apartment, prompting our awkward protagonist to scratch his ear and admit that he is just going to pick up some dinner on his way home. Seeing an opportunity to unwind, Haina gets a playful look on her face and points out that going home so early on a nice night would be an absolute waste, warmly inviting him out for a round of drinks on her tab. Shortly after, the pair arrives at a cozy local pub, clinking their overflowing beer mugs together in a cheerful toast. As they settle in, Haina takes a satisfying drink and points out that this is actually their very first time sharing a drink together, noting that she has never once seen him attend any of their department's official team dinners. While Youngwoo lets out a nervous chuckle, Haina sighs in frustration and candidly complains about how mean and shallow their office environment is, explaining that everyone else is merely pretending to be hostile just to appease their demanding team leader. She reassures the anxious young man that he is actually not bad at his job at all, suggesting that the team leader simply holds everyone to completely unrealistic and overbearing standards. Jungwoo agrees with a relieved smile, listening as Haina notes that Miju is likely just projecting her own obsessive work ethic onto everyone else. Although Jungwoo sheepishly acknowledges that he still has a massive amount of skills to learn, Haina playfully pouts and teases him for being so modest right after she went through the trouble of standing up for him. Looking at his kind colleague, our soft-hearted protagonist is deeply touched, realizing that this is the very first time in his life he has ever spent genuine, comfortable time with a coworker. With a warm smile on his face, he looks down at his glass and softly apologizes for his initial awkwardness, fully embracing the rare warmth of a true friend in his otherwise cold professional life. Resting her chin on her hand, a slightly tipsy Haina admits to Jungwoo that she truly regrets not taking better care of him in the office sooner. She explains that their team leader, Seo Miju, has a notoriously fiery and difficult personality, revealing that she herself suffered quite a lot in the past whenever she dared to go against her superior's wishes. Jungwoo is genuinely surprised to learn this, listening intently as Haina confesses that even though she knew the office bullying was wrong, she felt she had absolutely no choice but to go along with the team leader's demands just to protect herself. Looking at him with deep sympathy, she gently notes how incredibly difficult things must have been for him lately. Brushing off her concerns with a warm smile, Jungwoo places his beer glass back down on the table, reassuring her that he has already learned how to handle workplace hostility. He adds that simply knowing there is someone as kind and supportive as her on their team is more than enough to make him feel better, letting out a bright, genuine laugh. Touched by his positive attitude and resilience, Haina's eyes soften as she smiles warmly back at him. Placing her hand gently over her heart, she sincerely thanks him for saying such sweet and reassuring words. Stepping out of the pub, the cool night air greets them as they begin walking down the quiet, illuminated streets together. Noticing the drop in temperature, Jungwoo politely asks Haina if she is heading toward the subway station or if she would prefer for him to call a taxi to take her home safely. Instead of answering right away, Haina playfully ponders what she should do, admitting that she is simply having too much fun tonight to end the evening just yet. She points out that the late-night buses have already stopped running and almost all of the nearby restaurants are closed, before casually turning to him and noting that he mentioned living quite close to this area. This unexpected remark catches our clueless protagonist completely off guard, leaving this dumbass stammering in absolute shock as he tries to process what she is implying. Haina simply smiles, looking incredibly charming under the streetlights as they continue walking side by side down the pavement, their hands nearly brushing. Stepping slightly ahead of him, she turns back with a highly inviting and playful pose, directly asking how he feels about taking the party back to his place. Later in a conditioning session, Jungwoo finds himself completely caught off guard as Haina drops a massive bombshell, revealing that she knows exactly what happened in the workplace with team leader Seo Miju a couple of days ago. Sweating profusely, our startled protagonist can only stammer in shock as Haina calmly explains that she heard absolutely everything. Standing before him completely unbothered, Haina bluntly makes it clear that she has no personal interest in his private training life or who he chooses to engage with. She further notes that she does not care about his invisible status at the company, nor does she care that their toxic boss constantly berates him in public. Hearing this cold confession, the helpless Jungwoo is left utterly bewildered, desperately wondering what her true motives could possibly be. As she paces around him, Haina points out that although Miju absolutely loathed him, the haughty team leader submitted to his strange actions far too easily, which immediately aroused her suspicion. To uncover his secret, Haina admits that she deliberately put on a kind, supportive facade to lower his guard and gain his trust. With a smug, calculating grin, she finally reveals her ultimate goal, stating that she wants to know exactly what kind of blackmail or leverage he is using against their team leader. She explains that she initially expected him to spill all of his secrets if she treated him with a little bit of warmth, but was left frustrated because this gullible idiot was either too clever to fall for her trick or simply too clueless to realize what she was doing. To force his hand, Haina holds up her smartphone, revealing a highly humiliating and sussy photo she took of Jungwoo bound to a chair during their conditioning session. She coldly advises him that it would be in his best interest to tell her the absolute truth immediately, unless he wants every single employee at the company to see him in such an unsightly and embarrassing state. With a malicious smirk, she taunts him that while leaking the photo would make his professional life infinitely worse, it would certainly be highly amusing for her to watch him suffer. Left completely paralyzed and shivering in his bindings, Jungwoo grinds his teeth in pure, suffocating humiliation, finally realizing with absolute clarity that this backstabbing woman has simply been playing with him like a toy from the very beginning. Just as his feelings of betrayal and anger reach their absolute peak, a glowing blue digital screen suddenly materializes before his eyes, declaring that the extreme disdain he is facing has officially reached its absolute limit. With a satisfying chime, the system announces that his outsider mode has successfully leveled up. Consumed by an overwhelming surge of raw fury, Jungwoo lets out a deafening, rage-filled scream at the deceitful woman, letting his pent-up resentment explode. Instantly, another holographic prompt flashes in the air, confirming that a powerful new ability has officially been unlocked, setting the stage for a dramatic turning point. As a bright morning sun rises over the Grand Ocean Square high-rise, the bustling daily commute is already in full swing inside a heavily crowded subway car. Riding among the tightly packed passengers is a smug Haina, who is currently engrossed in her phone, staring at the highly sussy photo of a bound Han Jungwoo. She confidently tells herself that this absolute nightmare won't just end with Jungwoo getting fired from his job, but that his entire life will be completely ruined. Smiling maliciously at her screen, she reflects that if this gullible idiot had any real pride, he never would have tolerated such intense disrespect for this long. She is absolutely certain that he will eventually crawl back to her to beg for mercy, though she fully intends to break his stubborn arrogance first. In her vivid, self-indulgent daydream, Haina imagines a humiliated Jungwoo down on his knees, desperately begging at her high-heeled feet to save his career. She tells herself that once she finally extracts the secret leverage he holds over team leader Seo Miju, she will go ahead and leak his sussy photos to the entire company anyway. A wicked, satisfied grin spreads across her face as she stands in the train car, quietly admitting to herself that she is getting incredibly excited just imagining the look of absolute despair on his face when his world finally crumbles. Her dark fantasies are suddenly interrupted by the automated train announcement, confirming that they are arriving at the next station as the screen doors slowly glide open. As the massive crowd of passengers begins shifting and pushing past each other to exit, Haina stands near the doorway, waiting for her stop. However, as the crowd presses tightly against her, her eyes suddenly widen in pure, unadulterated shock. Flinching in surprise, she lets out a sharp, uneasy breath, completely frozen in place by an unexpected feeling. Annoyed by the intrusion, Haina tells herself that she is starting her day with terrible luck, realizing with mounting disgust that an incredibly bold molester has targeted her on the crowded train. To her absolute horror, a mysterious, transparent hand begins initiating a highly aggressive, blatant conditioning session, firmly grabbing her bag with zero regard for her boundaries. Deeply violated, she internally curses the crazy bastard and instantly spins around in a rage, loudly demanding to know where they think they are touching. But as she gasps and prepares to confront her attacker, her anger instantly turns to absolute bewilderment, finding only a crowd of ordinary commuters who are completely minding their own business. Left staring in confusion, she realizes there is absolutely no visible culprit in sight. Looking back at the crowded train car, a sweating and deeply unsettled Haina is completely bewildered, wondering why there is absolutely nobody standing directly behind her despite the very clear touch in the bag she just felt. Her confusion is suddenly interrupted when a familiar face approaches, as Manager O politely calls her name and remarks that it is quite a surprise to run into her on their morning commute. As Manager O casually asks if she is on her way to work, Haina quickly tries to compose herself, greeting her senior colleague while her mind frantically races. She wonders if Manager O was actually the sneaky culprit who touched her bag earlier, but immediately dismisses the thought since he is standing directly in front of her. Little does this backstabbing snake know, the completely invisible Han Jungwoo is standing right behind her, wearing a smug, malicious grin as he prepares to put his newly unlocked powers to the test. While Manager O continues their polite conversation, casually noting that he didn't know she also rode subway, line 2, Jungwoo decides that it is the perfect time to initiate his revenge. Without warning, Haina's eyes widen in absolute terror as she gasps, feeling a sudden and highly aggressive training session pressing firmly against her hands. She instantly realizes with mounting panic that this relentless conditioning routine is definitely not being performed by Manager O, especially since her colleague is standing right before her eyes. As the phantom hands intensify their relentless fitness conditioning, Haina is completely horrified to find that she is also being subjected to a powerful full-body conditioning session, finding herself held so tightly from behind that she can barely move her body at all. Struggling to keep her composure as the invisible Jungwoo whispers mockingly behind her ear, she bites her lip in intense fluster, completely at the mercy of this silent, high-intensity workplace fitness routine. Standing just inches away, Jungwoo smugly reflects on how beautifully his plan is working, noting that even if she tries to scream for help, everyone on the crowded train, including the oblivious Manager O, will simply think she has completely lost her mind. While Manager O casually asks if she has seen the company cafeteria's breakfast menu today, the only thing the poor, trembling woman can do is try her absolute best to ignore the exhausting workout. Gasping for air, she weakly stammers out a polite agreement, completely unaware that her smug junior colleague has firmly resolved to make this train ride a pure, non-stop hell for her as payback for her wicked betrayal. To Haina's absolute horror, the invisible trainer decides to transition the intense workout program higher, initiating a highly targeted flexibility routine. She is left trembling in disbelief, frantically wondering how such highly expensive training is even possible on a packed commuter train. Observing her shaking movements, a highly puzzled Manager O asks if she is feeling unwell, prompting a deeply flushed Haina to nervously stammer that her stomach is simply acting up a bit. Internally, the poor girl is desperately pleading for him to just look away and ignore her, completely mortified as the invisible Jungwoo intensifies his relentless training session from behind. She is left utterly devastated, struggling to believe that such an exhausting, high-intensity endurance workout is actively occurring right next to her completely oblivious coworker. She finds the entire ordeal deeply humiliating and incredibly distressing, unable to stop herself from shaking violently under the sheer toll of the non-stop fitness routine. Desperately trying to maintain her professional composure, Haina attempts to reassure her colleague that she is perfectly fine, but her words are cut short when she lets out a sharp gasp as the phantom workout pushes her endurance to its absolute peak. Fortunately for our thoroughly exhausted backstabbing snake, the subway train finally chimes as it arrives at the next station, signaling that the screen doors are opening. Forcing herself to gather her scattered sanity, Haina realizes that she desperately needs to escape this grueling training session immediately. Rushing out of the train doors as soon as they open, she quickly calls out to a bewildered Manager O that she will see him at work later, awkwardly claiming that she just remembered some highly urgent business she needs to take care of. Rushing onto the platform in a daze, she leaves her colleague standing in the subway car, completely dumbfounded by her bizarre and sudden departure. With the station doors open, a panicked Haina desperately tries to make her exit, but to her absolute horror, the massive, tightly packed crowd of morning commuters completely blocks her path. Squeezed tightly against the other passengers, she looks around in sheer desperation, quickly realizing with a sinking heart that there is absolutely no way for her to push through the wall of people and get off the train. Internally screaming for the crowd to wait, the poor girl is forced backward, her face blushing furiously as she is pinned helplessly inside the car. To her utter devastation, the automated subway announcement chimes once more, confirming that the train doors are officially closing. As the metal doors slide shut with a heavy click, Haina cries out in silent despair, realizing that her golden opportunity to escape this nightmare has officially vanished. Standing frozen as the train resumes its journey, a sweating and deeply anxious Haina is left completely at the mercy of her surroundings. Watching her every move with a cold, vengeful grin, the invisible Han Jungwoo smugly notes that this deceptive woman is now completely trapped in the corner with nowhere left to run. Stepping directly behind his helpless target, our invisible trainer decides that it is finally time to administer a highly demanding, hands-on conditioning session as direct punishment for her blackmail scheme. Holding his hand directly over her bag, Jungwoo prepares to initiate a relentless, high-intensity training routine, ready to teach this backstabbing snake a lesson she will never forget. Under a clear blue sky outside the Grand Ocean Square building, Han Jungwoo walks confidently down the street, feeling immensely satisfied that he has successfully achieved his ultimate objective. He reflects on how, while Haina was completely distracted by his intense invisible training session, he was able to use his newly unlocked outsider ability to sneakily steal her smartphone directly out of her purse. Smiling smugly to himself as he reviews the device, this clever protagonist is thoroughly pleased that he was able to punish the backstabbing Hana, while ensuring she will no longer be able to use those highly sussy photos to threaten him. However, his brief moment of triumph is suddenly interrupted when the stolen phone begins to ring, displaying an incoming call from a contact saved under the highly offensive name, Crazy Disgrace. Looking closely at the screen in absolute bewilderment, Jungwoo realizes with a start who this caller must actually be, left sweating in surprise by the incredibly terrible timing. After a brief moment of hesitation, he decides to answer, pressing the phone to his ear and listening quietly. On the other end of the line, the haughty voice of team leader Seo Miju rings out, offering a cold greeting to Hana and directly demanding to know where she is currently located. Walking purposefully through the area, the oblivious Miju has absolutely no idea that she is actually speaking to her mistreated subordinate, leaving a highly startled Jungwoo standing in silence as he prepares to handle this unexpected twist in his grand revenge plan. Continuing her call with what she believes is Hana, team leader Seo Miju coldly instructs her subordinate to set up everything she requested for the day, asking if the preparations are fully good to go. She firmly notes that she gave her plenty of time to finish the task, but is met with an absolute tense silence on the other end of the line. Confused, Miju calls out Hana's name once more and asks if she is even listening, only to look at her screen in utter bewilderment as the call suddenly disconnects. Staring at her phone, she realizes with immense annoyance that her junior colleague has actually dared to hang up on her. Just as she is reeling from the disrespect, the distinct sound of footsteps approaches, and Han Jungwoo calmly addresses her. Walking straight up to his formidable boss with a knowing grin, Jungwoo notes that she came to work today, politely asking if she is feeling any better. Miju spins around in sheer surprise, her eyes widening as she realizes it is none other than Jungwoo standing before her. Upon hearing his explanation that he simply heard she was under the weather, Miju immediately bristles, coldly snapping that her condition is certainly not so bad that she needs his sympathy. Letting out a heavy, irritated sigh, Miju turns on her heel and walks away, condescendingly advising him that if he truly has enough free time to worry about her health, he should start pulling his own weight on the team instead. However, as she marches past him down the hallway, her pulse begins to race frantically. She realizes that even though it was a perfectly normal morning greeting, she snapped at him, aggressively, before she could even control her response. Miju quietly reflects on how Jungwoo's mere presence has always irritated her in the past, but now, just hearing his voice is enough to send intense, shivering chills down her entire spine. She vividly recalls the dramatic workplace incident, admitting to herself that ever since that intense conditioning session, her body has started to feel completely different. She remembers how, on that fateful day, she was forced to leave work exceptionally early just to rush home and wash away all lingering traces of the phantom workout. Standing under the warm, cascading water of her home shower, Miju is seen initiating a forearm training session. In an effort to relieve her building muscle tension and soothe her racing thoughts, she endures a rigorous hand endurance workout, focusing entirely on a solo forearm and wrist curl practice. Her body shivers under the warm spray as she drives her demanding self-conditioning session to its absolute limits, desperately trying to regain her composure after her brief encounter with her mysterious trainer. Miju initially assumed that she would be able to completely forget about her exhausting workplace conditioning session, but she quickly realizes that she is entirely unable to do so. In her moments, the lingering effects of that intense core conditioning routine still remain deep in her muscles. As she lies in her bed, she finds herself continuously distracted by these memories, even fantasizing about her invisible trainer suddenly returning to initiate another relentless full-body training sesh. Her heart races as she anticipates that these phantom workouts could resurface at any moment, leaving her completely breathless as she imagines the trainer's hands starting another hand endurance workout. Deeply conflicted, she wonders how her body would react if that relentless bastard were to force himself on her for another intense conditioning session, imagining his high-intensity routine pushing her endurance to its absolute limits once again. In her vivid thoughts, her body works up an immense sweat as she experiences the overwhelming peak of a full-body workout. She is utterly horrified to realize that she might actually be highly energized by the mere memory of her phantom trainer's aggressive workouts. Grinding her teeth in pure frustration and letting out an angry groan, she curls up on her side, desperately trying to ignore her thinking. Back in the present morning light, team leader Seo Miju continues walking away down the street, leaving Jungwoo to watch her retreating figure with a calm, observant gaze. Watching his boss march off, Jungwoo quietly notes to himself that her nasty and arrogant attitude still hasn't changed at all, reflecting on how much effort it truly takes for a person to reform their personality. But as a smug, cunning grin spreads across his face, our clever protagonist cheerfully concludes that it is actually much better for him this way, as her stubborn behavior will only make his upcoming revenge workouts all the more satisfying. Still standing outside the office, Jung-woo lets out a dark, vengeful chuckle, thinking that his hostile superiors can go ahead and mock him all they want. He confidently tells himself that the more they mistreat him, the stronger his special system will grow, allowing him to eventually subject team leader Seo Mi-ju to a highly demanding, full-body restraint conditioning session and total submission training program. In his wild, self-indulgent daydream, he envisions his arrogant boss completely bound, kneeling at his feet under his absolute dominance. Snapping out of his vivid daydream with a smug grin, Jung-woo tells himself that before he can execute that ultimate fantasy, he needs to take care of a more immediate issue, holding up Haina's stolen smartphone. Meanwhile, back inside the busy office department, a deeply panicked Haina sits at her desk with her head in her hands, desperately searching her cubicle. Looking at her empty desk, she realizes with absolute horror that her phone is completely gone, frantically wondering where on earth she could have dropped it. Touching her hand in a cold sweat, she desperately wonders if she somehow lost the device during that incredibly chaotic and intense subway training session earlier that morning. Observing her behavior, a concerned manager O approaches her cubicle and asks if something is wrong. Haina quickly tries to save face, nervously claiming that everything is perfectly fine while her mind races in pure desperation. She realizes with mounting dread that without her phone, she has absolutely no way to threaten Han Jung-woo since the highly sussy photos are no longer in her possession, biting her thumb in absolute rage over losing the valuable leverage she worked so hard to acquire. Manager O is left standing nearby, looking completely confused by her tense and highly defensive reaction. Just then, Jung-woo casually strolls into the department and approaches Manager O, politely presenting the work documents he was asked to print out. As Manager O accepts the papers and questions why he chose to deliver them in person, Haina freezes in absolute shock, staring at her smug colleague in disbelief. Grinding her teeth in quiet fury, she wonders why on earth Jung-woo looks so incredibly relaxed and composed, questioning if this idiot actually believes he has already won their little game. However, a sudden realization hits her as she tells herself that Jung-woo likely has no idea she has lost her phone. Realizing she can still use this to her advantage, she tells herself that if she plays her cards right and bluffs her way through, she can still maintain her dominance. Deciding to take immediate action, Haina calls out to Jung-woo, catching the attention of both men as she confidently asks if they can step aside to speak privately for a brief moment. On a quiet rooftop, under a clear blue sky, Haina approaches Han Jung-woo with an air of absolute confidence. She smugly remarks that she is surprised he actually managed to free himself from those bindings and show up for work, teasingly suggesting that it must have been quite a struggle for him. With a sussy grin, she walks past him and crudely asks if he at least managed to soothe his pathetic self after her little trap. Instead of cowering as she expects, our protagonist remains completely unfazed. Standing calmly with his arms crossed, Jung-woo replies that he did indeed soothe himself quite well. His casual and confident response catches Haina completely off guard, causing her smug expression to falter as a bead of sweat rolls down her cheek. Trying to regain control of the situation, Haina crosses her arms and asks if he has finally thought over her proposition. When Jung-woo playfully feigns ignorance and asks what exactly he was supposed to think over, Haina's irritation begins to show. She bluntly reminds him of the highly sussy photos she holds, warning him that there will be no point in feeling regret once she leaks them to the entire company. Believing she still holds all the leverage, she steps closer, pointing a finger at him, and offers him one last chance. She demands that he reveal team leader Seo Mi-ju's weakness, promising that she will delete the photos in exchange for his cooperation. But before she can even finish her sentence, Jung-woo's hand suddenly shoots forward, firmly grabbing her by the hand. Pulling and calling her a sussy baka, Jung-woo aggressively invades her personal space, dryly asking why she has to talk so much. A shocked gasp escapes her lips. With dark, intense eyes, he reminds her of his previous warning, declaring that she does not scare him in the slightest, and telling her to go ahead and do whatever she wants with those photos. He mockingly questions if she simply lacks the guts to actually leak them, or if she is secretly terrified of ending up just like their team leader. Haina stands frozen in absolute terror, sweating profusely as his words sink in. Seizing the moment, Jung-woo suggests that she should try changing her approach, mockingly advising her to use her training just like she did when she tricked him. He firmly grips her hand, playfully whispering that he might actually share Mi-ju's weakness as a special favor if she behaves like his obedient servant. Before she can even process his words, Jungwoo initiates a sudden, firm grip training session, catching her completely off guard. Utterly horrified by his bold retaliation, Haina lets out a panicked shriek, calling him a complete madman. Trembling with pure rage and humiliation, she quickly breaks free and storms toward the exit. As she flees the rooftop, Jungwoo watches her retreat with an amused, smug grin. In her mind, the completely defeated woman frantically wonders how on earth he could be so incredibly bold, her high heels clicking rapidly against the floor as she slams the heavy door shut behind her. Left alone on the rooftop, our protagonist can only let out a satisfied chuckle, silently repeating her name, Yang Haina, as he celebrates another successful counterattack. Watching Haina stomp away, Jungwoo can't help but smile smugly to himself under the morning sun. He reflects on how she was so desperately obsessed with uncovering team leader Seo Miju's weakness, silently noting that with his unique outsider abilities, he will always hold the ultimate advantage over her. He considers how she had the sheer audacity to assault and blackmail him just because her plans failed, concluding that she possesses some truly despicable tendencies. Pocketing his hands as he strolls across the rooftop, our clever protagonist firmly resolves that he will have to subject her to a thorough, high-intensity conditioning session of her own in the very near future. Chuckling darkly to himself, Jungwoo reaches for the door to head back inside the building, but just as he turns the knob, his smug victory is cut short by a sudden, painful impact. He collides head-on with someone entering the rooftop, letting out a sharp cry of shock as he stumbles backward and quietly curses his terrible luck. Clutching his face in sheer agony, the startled young man grumbles in frustration, wondering what kind of idiot just ran into him. However, his annoyance quickly evaporates when he notices the woman who just glided past. Walking with flawless, elegant posture, a beautiful woman with long, wavy hair passes right by him, completely oblivious to his presence in his invisible state. She is engrossed in a phone call, casually confirming to the person on the other end that she has just finished up her tasks and doesn't anticipate any further problems with the project. As the distinct clicking of her high heels fades down the path, Jungwoo's eyes widen in recognition. He quickly realizes that this elegant passerby is none other than team leader Song Chae-won, the formidable head of Team 1 and his own boss's fierce workplace rival. Walking along the rooftop, team leader Song Chae-won continues her phone call, her voice taking on a remarkably soft and affectionate tone. She asks her companion how things are on his end and if he has been busy lately, warmly asking what time he expects to get home today so she can prepare something nice for dinner. Listening from nearby, Jungwoo immediately realizes that she must be speaking directly to her husband. He bitterly recalls the office gossip surrounding Chae-won's personal life, remembering that she married the son of a major corporate shareholder last year. Since her father is the company president and her husband is a wealthy second-generation chaebol, her own promotion to associate director is already imminent. Grinding his teeth in quiet envy, Jungwoo laments how her entire life has always been blessed with endless luxury and privilege, drawing a painful contrast to his own upbringing defined by poverty and hardship. As he slowly attempts to sneak back inside the office to avoid an awkward encounter, Chae-won's conversation takes an even more sussy turn. She sweet-talks her partner into picking up a bottle of wine on his way home to help set the mood, before casually suggesting that it might be about time they finally start trying to have a new companion, especially since both of their families have been pressuring them about it. Overhearing this personal topic, Jungwoo completely freezes, his hand locking up right on the door handle. He can't help but look back over his shoulder in sheer shock as the conversation continues. Through the receiver, her husband apparently expresses some reluctance due to fatigue, prompting a stressed Chae-won to hold her head and sigh heavily, reminding him that they already went over this discussion last time. Sweating profusely, Jungwoo realizes with a sinking feeling that he has just overheard a dispute that he was absolutely not supposed to hear. Panic setting in, our protagonist desperately tells himself that he needs to escape the rooftop immediately before he gets caught. But as this nervous idiot tries to slip through the door, the handle lets out an incredibly loud, metallic squeak. Jungwoo's heart drops into his stomach as he freezes in absolute terror, internally screaming and cursing the door for being so ridiculously loud at the worst possible moment. Hearing the sudden noise, Chae-won instantly spins around, her eyes locking directly onto our startled protagonist. After a tense, silent stare, she calmly tells her husband that she will have to call him back later and ends the call. She slowly marches over to where Jungwoo is standing, her high heels clacking sharply against the concrete floor. Watching her approach, a terrified Jungwoo tells himself that he is completely finished. Desperate to save himself from her wrath, he raises his hands defensively and lets out a tense, forced laugh, stammering that he wasn't trying to eavesdrop on her conversation and that he simply happened to be there by accident. Confronted with Jungwoo's nervous excuses, team leader Song Chae-won stares at him in absolute silence, her expression cold and completely unreadable. Our anxious protagonist sweats profusely under her gaze, internally panicking as he wonders why on earth she isn't saying a single word to defend her privacy. But instead of lashing out, Chaewon simply turns on her heel and glides right past him, opening the rooftop door and leaving the area without uttering a sound. Jung-woo is left standing completely dumbfounded, staring at the closed door in disbelief. He can't help but realize that she likely didn't care whether a low-level employee like him overheard her private business, feeling a sudden sting of insult at being treated like a complete nobody. He lets out a heavy sigh, trying to comfort himself with the thought that it might actually be better this way, since he managed to avoid a major confrontation. However, his frustration quickly flares back up as he rejects the passive treatment, refusing to let his pride be stomped on so easily. Just as he is wallowing in his irritation, a sharp, familiar voice cuts through his thoughts, loudly calling out his name. Jung-woo turns to find his formidable boss, team leader Seo Mi-ju, standing right before him. Massaging her temples in intense frustration, Mi-ju barks at him, demanding to know what exactly he has been doing and why he is wasting time screwing around on the clock. Forced back into a submissive employee role, a quiet Jung-woo can only stand with his head bowed, swallowing his pride as his toxic superior continues to lecture him. The scene transitions to the end of the long workday as the warm sunset bathes a grand apartment high-rise. Stepping into her quiet home, a thoroughly exhausted Seo Mi-ju lets out a weary sigh and kicks off her high heels. She complains to herself about how much work has piled up during her unexpected time off, walking barefoot into her living room to finally relax. Pulling her tight turtleneck sweater over her head to wear and wind down after a brutal shift, she groans about how many exhausting things she has to worry about lately. Free from her professional facade, her anger instantly focuses onto one specific target, and she furiously mutters Han Jung-woo's name. She bitterly reflects on a highly irritating incident from earlier that day, desperately wondering what on earth that idiot could have done to make her rival, Song Chaewon, come down on her so aggressively. She vividly recalls the moment Chaewon suddenly appeared at her desk, bluntly scolding her in front of the department about her failure to manage her subordinates properly. Mi-ju clenches her teeth in pure rage, remembering how she couldn't even speak up to defend herself because the lecture was directly tied to Han Jung-woo's status. Recalling how she eventually cornered Jung-woo to scream at him for his incompetence, the frustrated team leader angrily questions why she has to go through so much trouble and humiliation, all because of that low-ranking piece of trash. In her quiet bathroom, warm steam fills the air as the tub fills with hot water. Stepping out of her room, team leader Seo Mi-ju lets out a sigh of relief, thinking to herself that at least her mysterious spectral trainer didn't make an appearance today. She rationalizes that staying active and busy at the office actually helped keep him away, believing that being surrounded by coworkers at the workplace made it much harder for him to approach her. Now that she is finally back in the safety of her own home, she believes she can finally let her guard down. Tying her hair up, she steps into the hot bath and sinks into the water, closing her eyes as she prepares to finally relax and unwind. But her peaceful evening is shattered in an instant. Suddenly, she gasps in pure shock as the distinct splash of water and a very real, firm hand presses against her tub. Whirling around with a flushed face, her eyes widen in absolute horror as the completely invisible Jung-woo suddenly speaks, calmly remarking that the water temperature is absolutely perfect. Mi-ju trembles in intense fluster, her mind racing as she frantically wonders how long he has been hiding in the room with her, questioning if he was there for just a minute or right from the very start. Grinding her teeth in frustration, she whimpers and calls him a bastard, utterly devastated that just when she thought she was finally free from his torment, her phantom trainer has trapped her once again. Standing over his helpless boss in his invisible state, Jung-woo's mind flashes back to her cruel scolding earlier that day. He reflects on how she treated him so ruthlessly, thinking that while eavesdropping on team leader Song Chaewon's private conversation was technically wrong, Mi-ju should have at least listened to his side of the story first. Instead, she chose to publicly humiliate him, calling him an embarrassment to the team and demanding a formal letter of apology. Jung-woo realizes that she simply took the first available opportunity to tear him apart, treating him like garbage simply because of his low status at the company. Looking down at his flushed, shivering boss, Jung-woo's eyes narrow with dark intensity. He tells himself that her arrogant attitude and the way she constantly looks down on others really stokes a man's desire for revenge. With a smug, triumphant grin spreading across his face, he decides it is time to teach her another lesson she will never forget. Without a shred of mercy, he reaches out into the room and initiates a highly demanding, high-intensity conditioning session directly in the room, leaving the arrogant team leader completely at his mercy. Later, standing victorious in the bathroom, after a highly demanding endurance training session, a spent Jung-woo lets out a weary sigh, jokingly noting to himself that he can't squeeze anything else out of his training routine anymore. Looking down at his thoroughly exhausted boss, our smug protagonist asks Seo Miju if she is doing all right, before dryly concluding that she is clearly in no fit condition to offer him a proper response. As he prepares to leave, Jungwoo advises her that this is precisely what happens to people who look down on others. Leaving the shivering, spent team leader collapsed on her bathroom floor, he delivers one final warning, telling her that she had better start behaving like a decent human being from now on if she wants to avoid meeting his invisible persona ever again. Miju can only lie there panting heavily, flushing crimson as her absolute nightmare of a night finally draws to a close. A few days pass, and the daily grind at the Grand Ocean Square high-rise continues as usual. Back at his office cubicle, a sleepy Jungwoo lets out a massive yawn as he lazily types away on his computer keyboard. His peaceful morning is suddenly interrupted by the sharp clacking of high heels and a commanding voice demanding to know if he is at his desk. Turning around, he is startled to find team leader Seo Miju standing right before his cubicle, looking highly irritated in her thick blue jacket. Trying to play the role of the submissive underling, Jungwoo nervously greets his superior and asks how he can help her. Crossing her arms, Miju reveals that she just reviewed his latest email and sternly questions if he is absolutely sure that the recipients are correct. She aggressively lectures him, pointing out that she explicitly instructed him to only carbon copy the general manager and the recruiting team leaders, demanding to know why on earth this idiot managed to include every single employee in the entire department instead. Realizing his massive blunder, a sweating Jungwoo immediately springs up from his chair and bows deeply in apology, stammering out that he didn't know and simply made a stupid mistake. He remains frozen in a humble bow, desperately trying to keep his composure. Meanwhile, Miju glares down at him with pure rage, her teeth clenched in intense frustration as she lets out an annoyed sigh, utterly exasperated by his constant office blunders. Rather than launching into a public tirade as she usually would, team leader Seo Miju surprisingly tempers her anger. She calmly lectures Jungwoo that it is about time he stopped making these kinds of careless mistakes, advising him that no matter how rushed he might be, he must always double-check his work before sending out an email. Acknowledging her advice, Jungwoo can only watch in absolute disbelief as she turns on her heel and walks away. This dumbass is thoroughly confused, wondering why that was all she had to say, since normally she would have at least thrown some highly toxic insults his way. The narrative notes that, after that fateful night, there was a definite and noticeable change in Seo Miju's attitude at the office. She began walking through the department with a highly wary and nervous demeanor, constantly looking over her shoulder as if she were deeply afraid of some invisible presence lurking in her shadow. We get a brief flashback to their intense encounter in her room, where Jungwoo relentlessly pushed her to her limits during an aggressive endurance training session, demanding to know if it was really so hard for her to just behave like a decent person. He vividly remembers delivering a heavy conditioning workout in the gym, smugly declaring that justice was officially served while her body shivered and panted under the sheer exhaustion of the non-stop fitness routine. He recalls his final warning, telling her to behave herself if she never wanted to meet him again. Back in the present, Miju grits her teeth in silent fury, internally cursing her mysterious, invisible tormentor. Observing her highly defensive and tense posture as she retreats to her office, Jungwoo wonders to himself if his haughty boss is actually starting to fear him. A smug, victorious grin spreads across his face as he cheerfully concludes that his grand revenge is finally starting to pay off, happily anticipating that his professional life is going to be much easier from now on. However, his quiet celebration is suddenly interrupted by an annoyed click of a tongue. Jungwoo turns to find manager Yang Haina standing right behind him, crossing her arms as she teasingly asks if he really managed to get scolded by the team leader yet again. She playfully lectures him that since he was just in trouble, he should at least try to act a little bit depressed instead of sitting there with a massive happy grin on his face. Glancing back at his deceptive colleague, Jungwoo can only stare in quiet annoyance, wondering what on earth this woman wants with him now. Standing near his cubicle, Haina continues their conversation with a sweet but deeply manipulative tone. She points out that for some unknown reason, team leader Seo Miju seems remarkably reluctant to speak to him lately, teasingly suggesting that perhaps the boss has simply given up on him entirely. However, she maliciously adds that she thinks letting him off so easily is completely unfair. With a smug grin, she announces that, as his senior colleague, she has generously decided to mentor him one-on-one so he doesn't fall behind any further, ordering him to stay late after work starting today. When a completely dumbfounded Jungwoo stammers in surprise, Haina places her finger on her chin and playfully asks if he is seriously planning to turn down her kind offer to assist him during her own free time. Jungwoo can only grind his teeth in silent fury, bitterly reflecting on how team leader Seo Miju finally stopped nagging him, only for this backstabbing snake to immediately take her place. He internally screams, furiously wondering why on earth this malicious woman is continuing to target him so relentlessly. Later that night, the department office is bathed in pitch darkness. Haina suddenly dumps a massive, towering stack of old documents directly onto Jungwoo's desk with a heavy thud. She bluntly notes that based on his earlier email, he is still incredibly poor at filling out his reports, ordering him to review last year's entire archive tonight. Looking up at the impossible mountain of paperwork, a sweating Jungwoo protests that this assignment won't just take an hour or two. Haina dismisses his concerns with a cold shrug, dryly agreeing that she knows it is going to be a completely pointless struggle for him. Leaning in close to his face, she drops her friendly facade and whispers a chilling reminder. She warns him that even if he doesn't care about those sussy photos anymore, she still possesses plenty of other ways to completely ruin his life at the company, condescendingly advising him not to forget that they are in a professional workplace where she is his senior superior. Jungwoo lets out a weary sigh and directly asks if she is simply scheming again because she wants to uncover Seo Miju's weakness. With a wicked, triumphant grin, Haina admits that isn't actually her goal right now, declaring that she simply wants to stomp him directly into the dirt. Wishing him a playful mock of good luck, she turns on her heel and glides away, leaving him to tremble with pure, unbridled rage as he clutches his desk and curses her name under his breath. As she waits for the elevator to arrive, a smug Haina presses the call button, confidently telling herself that Jungwoo likely believed his troubles were finally over just because things had quieted down. She sneers that she isn't the type of person who gives up so easily, firmly resolving that while she will eventually uncover the team leader's weakness in due time, she is going to thoroughly punish him for daring to treat her like a joke first. Still gloating as she waits by the elevator, Haina smugly tells herself that she is going to harass Jungwoo so relentlessly that he will desperately miss the days when team leader Seo Miju was his only tormentor. However, her malicious daydream is suddenly cut short when she notices the elevator isn't arriving. Looking down at the panel, she blinks in confusion, wondering what is going on and questioning if she somehow forgot to actually press the button. Shaking off her confusion, she reaches out and firmly presses the button once again. But, to her absolute bewilderment, the panel refuses to light up or register her command. Sweating slightly in the quiet, dim hallway, she stares at the dead button, nervously wondering if the elevator has completely broken down. Little does this backstabbing snake know, she is absolutely not alone in the corridor. Lurking just inches behind her in his active, completely invisible state, Jungwoo stands with a wide, vengeful grin plastered across his face. Forced to take the emergency stairs due to the apparently broken elevator, a thoroughly annoyed Haina lets out a heavy sigh as she begins her long descent. Her high heels clack loudly against the concrete steps, and she bitterly complains about her terrible luck, groaning that walking down so many flights of stairs in high heels is going to take her forever. But as she carefully navigates the steps, a mysterious, invisible foot suddenly shoots out, tripping her right in her tracks. Letting out a sharp gasp of bewilderment, Haina completely loses her footing and tumbles forward, screaming in panic as she crashes heavily onto the concrete landing. Sprawled out on the cold floor, the thoroughly dazed woman rubs her sore knee, crying out in pain and desperately wondering what on earth she could have possibly tripped on in an empty, clear hallway. Her painful confusion is suddenly interrupted by a very real, mocking snicker echoing through the empty stairwell. Wincing in pain, she looks up wildly, only to be met with loud, booming laughter that sends intense chills down her spine. A familiar voice calmly asks if she is hurt, condescendingly suggesting that she is making a ridiculously big deal out of falling down just a couple of ordinary stairs. Looking around the empty landing in pure terror, a sweating Haina frantically demands to know who is there and where they are hiding, screaming in panic as she realizes she can't see anything at all despite the very clear voice speaking right beside her. Amusement dripping from his tone, the invisible Jungwoo asks her why on earth she is so incredibly surprised, mocking her by pointing out that this isn't exactly the first time she has experienced this strange phenomenon. With his hands casually slipped into his pockets, our invisible protagonist slowly and confidently steps down the stairs toward his helpless, terrified target. Staring blankly at the empty staircase, a terrified Haina stammers in absolute disbelief as she struggles to process the situation. A sudden, vivid flashback of her previous restraint conditioning session on the train rushes through her mind, and she gasps in pure horror as she finally connects the dots, realizing that this invisible entity is the exact same phantom subway trainer who subjected her to that intense fitness routine on her morning commute. A sinister chuckle echoes through the stairwell as Jungwoo smugly confirms her suspicion. Trembling on the floor, the panicked woman demands to know how on earth he managed to follow her all the way to her workplace. Standing over her in his translucent, invisible form, Jungwoo coldly replies that he didn't manage anything at all, declaring that he is everywhere at all times and making it brutally clear that she can never escape him. Shivering under his gaze, Haena gasps in terror, frantically asking what he plans to do to her now. Jungwoo mockingly reminds her of her own words about wanting to ruin him, adding with a wicked grin that he feels the exact same desire to crush her. He playfully questions what she thinks he is going to do next, leaving her completely frozen in suspense. Suddenly, Haena flinches in shock as she feels a sudden, intense burst of heat pressing against her. She experiences the overwhelming presence of her invisible trainer closing in, sending a jolt of pure panic through her body as Jungwoo lets out a smug, satisfied chuckle and initiates a sudden endurance training session. Completely losing her composure, the terrified woman lets out a furious scream, frantically swinging her arms and struggling to pull away, as she loudly demands that he get his dirty hands away from her. Later, Han Jungwoo is completely frozen in shock, unable to process the terrifying realization that he has actually been caught. He immediately panics, desperately wondering how on earth she managed to discover his secret. He quickly checks his system interface, confirming that his level 2 outsider mode is still active, with plenty of time remaining. Realizing that his invisibility has not failed him, this anxious dumbass begins to sweat profusely, frantically trying to recall if he made a careless mistake and dropped a clue that gave him away. Noticing his sudden silence, Haena lets out an amused chuckle and points out that he has gone completely quiet. She leans back with a smug expression, thoroughly enjoying his panic as she asks if he wants to know how she solved the mystery, revealing that this entire situation was actually a trap. As the peak of their intense conditioning session pushes her body's endurance to its absolute limits, Haena is suddenly overcome by a wave of familiarity. Shivering and panting heavily, she struggles to make sense of the intense training she is feeling. Suddenly, she recalls the feelings of her previous subway workout and realizes they are identical. A shocking memory flashes in her mind, and she realizes that this unique feeling is exactly like the full-body training session she had previously shared with Han Jungwoo himself. She admits to herself that she was far too overwhelmed at the time to connect the dots, but her muscle memory has finally solved the puzzle. She reflects on how brazenly Jungwoo has been acting around the office despite having absolutely nothing of worth going for him. When she looked back at how all the strange events at the company were mysteriously working out in his favor, she realized there could only be one logical explanation. She recalls how other powerful figures, like team leader Song Chaewon, had sternly lectured their own insolent subordinates about needing some sort of special leverage to act so bold. Looking at his smug grin, everything finally clicks for Haena. She realizes that Jungwoo is indeed capable of performing these invisible actions, and has been using his special powers to play games with both her and team leader Seo Mi-ju. Because she could not be absolutely sure of her theory, she decided to test him with this encounter. Looking up at our completely cornered protagonist with a wicked grin, the calculating woman smugly declares that she simply wants to completely stomp him out, leaving the stunned young man to face the consequences of his exposed secret. Haena continues to lay out her deduction, explaining that she managed to unravel the mystery by deliberately provoking him to see how he would react. She confidently prompts Jungwoo to guess what happened immediately after, teasingly asking if she is wrong about her theory as she scoffs with an amused grin. She directly addresses Han Jungwoo, but the young man only responds with an icy, tense silence. Seeing him refuse to speak, Haena's smugness only intensifies. She confidently states that his quiet reaction proves she is absolutely correct, declaring that he is completely finished now. She begins to mock him about how much he must have enjoyed messing with them, completely unaware that she has just walked straight into a trap of her own. Deciding that she has spoken far too much, Jungwoo decides that it is time to wrap up this part of their conditioning session. Although he did his best to maintain a calm and unfazed exterior, this lucky dumbass admits to himself that he was actually incredibly surprised. He is utterly stunned that Haena actually managed to figure out his secret identity, acknowledging that he was far too careless. He realizes that having someone like her know about his outsider abilities poses a severe threat to his safety at the company. However, since things have already escalated to this point, he quickly resolves to turn this major risk into a company-wide advantage. Towering over her, Jungwoo coldly addresses Haena, asking if she finally understands that she is absolutely nothing to him. To drive his point home, his invisible hands grip her hand, initiating a highly intense and sudden conditioning training session that leaves the arrogant woman flushing crimson and groaning in surprise. Jungwoo sternly commands her to stay completely out of his sight from now on, warning her that if she dares to cross him again, she will suffer far worse than she did today. He reinforces his threat with a final, highly demanding fitness conditioning session, ensuring she is thoroughly exhausted. Jung-woo quietly tells himself that this intense workout should serve as a perfect warning to keep her quiet, before casually turning on his heel and walking away. The scene transitions to the next morning at the Grand Ocean Square high-rise. Back at his office cubicle, Jung-woo's quiet routine is suddenly shattered when a hand aggressively slams a document directly onto his desk. Looking up in a panic, a startled Jung-woo flinches in surprise as a familiar voice calls out his name. Jung-woo reacts in sudden shock, demanding to know what is going on. It turns out to be none other than his formidable boss, team leader Seo Miju, standing right over his desk. She immediately launches into a harsh scolding, asserting that she explicitly told him to pay close attention to the details, yet he hasn't managed to improve his skills at all. Leaning aggressively against his cubicle, she looks down at him and demands to know if this sloppy work is truly the best he can do. Miju continues her public lecture, noting that it appeared he stayed at work late last night, and questioning why his draft is so terrible after all the overtime he allegedly spent. She condescendingly remarks that it is almost as if he is trying to show off how bad he is at his job. Leaning in with a smug, knowing grin, she pointedly asks if he was busy doing something else entirely last night instead of focusing on his professional duties. Jung-woo can only stare back in tense silence, his blood boiling as he clenches his jaw in pure rage. He immediately realizes that Yang Haina must have gone behind his back and shared his secrets with the team leader, bitterly cursing the deceitful woman in his mind. Meanwhile, Miju smugly glares down at him, confidently thinking that if this low-ranking employee believes he can play games with her, or that she will simply back down quietly, he is dead wrong. Instead of backing down, Jung-woo puts on a calm, confident smile and smoothly replies that he was indeed a little preoccupied last night. Internally, our cheeky protagonist mockingly notes that this stubborn boss still doesn't understand her place, wondering if she is practically begging him to initiate another grueling full-body training sesh. The air in the department quickly fills with intense, crackling tension as the two lock eyes in a fierce, silent standoff. However, their quiet battle is cut short when they catch the attention of team leader Song Chae-won, who is sitting nearby and watching their highly unusual interaction with a deeply puzzled and confused expression. Yang Haina loudly yells Han Jung-woo's name across the office, crossing her arms and aggressively scolding him in front of their colleagues. She barks that his sloppy work is causing everyone absolute trouble, demanding to know why on earth he is making decisions on his own when she explicitly instructed him to ask her for help if he didn't know what to do. Bowing his head, Jung-woo meekly stammers out an apology through gritted teeth. Internally, however, he is absolutely seething with rage, calling her a hypocrite for demanding he consult her after she deliberately ignored every single one of his messages. Unsatisfied with his quiet response, a smug hyena commands him to say it properly, asking if he has some sort of problem with what she is saying. Forced to play the submissive part-timer to keep up appearances, our frustrated protagonist can only swallow his pride, letting out a nervous, forced laugh as he assures her that of course he has no problem at all. Nearby, their colleagues watch the dramatic spectacle unfold. They whisper among themselves, noting that she is ripping into him again today, and remarking that she is basically acting like team leader number 2. They chuckle about how much effort it takes to constantly berate someone like that, wondering if Haina ever gets tired of it. One of the male co-workers approaches team leader Seo Miju, curiously asking if she was the one who instructed Haina to take charge of Han Jung-woo. When Miju quietly replies that she did no such thing, the co-worker wonders if the young man somehow managed to get on Haina's bad side. Miju remains completely silent, staring at the scene as the co-worker chuckles and remarks that seeing Jung-woo go through this public humiliation every day actually makes him feel a little bit of pity for the guy. Hearing the word pity, a dark, victorious grin spreads across Jung-woo's mind. He confidently tells himself that he is absolutely not the pitiful one in this office. Rather, that title belongs to the loudmouth woman scolding him. He reflects on how hilarious it is that Haina acts so incredibly tough and dominant in front of their co-workers, only to be completely wrecked behind closed doors. He vividly recalls his secret payback, where he used his active, invisible powers to subject the backstabbing snake to a highly intensive, relentless full-body training sesh. The memory of their workout continues to play in his mind, showing a highly intense and demanding workplace fitness routine. During their intense encounter, Jung-woo looms over her with a furious expression, aggressively demanding to know if she truly fails to understand what he is saying. He sternly reminds her that he explicitly ordered her to stay completely out of his sight. Even while pinned under his firm grip, the stubborn woman weakly curses him, desperately gasping to know why she should listen to him and for whose benefit she is supposed to comply. Letting out a cold, mocking chuckle, Jung-woo tells her that she seems to have completely forgotten about his temper. To make his point brutally clear, he immediately intensifies the workout. Haina gasps in pure shock as the sudden escalation catches her off guard, finding herself completely at the mercy of his relentless conditioning session. Before wrapping up the session, Jungwoo coldly advises her to carefully think about who would truly benefit if she decided to stop her insolent behavior. He drives the endurance training to its absolute peak, leaving her shivering and defeated. Returning to the present day, Jungwoo glares at his annoying colleague as she stands in front of his desk. He bitterly reflects on how, despite receiving such a severe and highly demanding warning, Yang Haina still chose to ignore his threats, foolishly continuing to act out against him in front of the entire office. The ongoing conflict between them is a never-ending cycle. Jungwoo vividly recalls another frustrating instance where Haina leaned directly over his desk, condescendingly demanding to know how much longer she was expected to keep checking his messy work. This frustrated dumbass could only mutter under his breath that she was the one who explicitly told him to consult her in the first place. She simply ignored his excuse, coldly advising him to at least act like he was planning to complete the tasks himself. As a smug, mockingly triumphant grin spread across her face, Jungwoo decided to administer some immediate, stealthy payback. Right there at her desk, his invisible hands initiated another sudden, high-intensity training session, catching her completely off guard and leaving her gasping in pure fluster as she frantically whispered to know if he had completely lost his mind. Jungwoo notes that their silent war raged all around the company. On another occasion, she sat comfortably in a red jacket, lecturing him that there was simply no end to the basic office skills she had to teach him. He quickly retaliated by delivering a stealthy, highly targeted conditioning session right under their colleagues' noses, leaving the haughty woman shivering in her chair. Throughout their professional lives, Yang Haina and he would constantly fight like cats and dogs. Even when standing in a crowded elevator, Haina could not resist taking a malicious swipe at him, loudly suggesting that he should try walking up the stairs sometimes, because his body could seriously use the exercise. Forced to swallow his boiling rage in front of their co-workers, Jungwoo internally screamed in absolute frustration, clenching his fists and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike back. That opportunity eventually presented itself inside the quiet, secluded storage room. Trapped among the heavy office shelves, Haina was subjected to a highly demanding, non-stop full-body training sesh. As she whimpered and begged him to stop, our relentless trainer completely ignored her objections, aggressively asking if she had any idea how much she had pissed him off earlier that day. He drove the hand endurance workout and intense conditioning routine to its absolute peak, sternly commanding her to stop messing around as she shivered violently under the overwhelming toll of his training program. The memory of the archive room training reaches its absolute peak, with Haina being pushed to her ultimate muscle limits as she collapses on the floor. Standing over her, a sweating Jungwoo curses under his breath in sheer exhaustion. He realizes that continuing this constant back-and-forth conflict is incredibly dangerous. He reflects on how much valuable energy he wastes fighting back against Yang Haina's petty attacks, realizing that at this rate, his official performance evaluation is going to get completely trashed. He firmly resolves that he needs to find a permanent solution to this headache very soon. Back in his memory, a thoroughly spent Haina whimpers for him to be trained gently, crying out that the intense workout makes her feel like her bag is splitting in half. Looking down at her with cold, uncaring eyes, Jungwoo simply tells her that she should just die then, delivering one final, highly demanding fitness conditioning to completely drain her of whatever energy she has left before slipping away. The scene transitions back to the main office, where team leader Song Chae-won is currently standing near the copier machine. Inspecting a printed document, she notices the faded print and realizes that the machine is likely out of ink. Turning around to delegate the chore, she calls out for Jungwoo to go and refill it, but she immediately stops when she notices his desk is completely empty. Looking around the quiet office, she wonders where on earth the young man has run off to. With her high heels clicking sharply against the floor, a thoroughly annoyed Chae-won turns on her heel and heads back, letting out a heavy sigh as she grumbles about whether she really has to take care of this annoying task herself. Walking down the hallway, team leader Song Chae-won mutters Han Jungwoo's name, but she quickly shakes her head and rubs her forehead in frustration. She firmly resolves to stop worrying about her subordinate, thinking to herself that she has absolutely no desire to get targeted by that mysterious, invisible bastard just because she treated someone poorly. As she reaches out to grab the handle of the storage room door, she suddenly freezes in surprise. Confused by a sudden noise, she pulls her hand back, realizing hitting her that she can clearly hear a highly unusual, muffled sound coming from directly inside the room. Unknown to Chae-won, a highly intense conditioning session is currently reaching its absolute peak inside the room. Pushed to her limits, A thoroughly exhausted Hana gasps and pants heavily under the toll of the non-stop fitness routine. In her sheer exhaustion, she loudly cries out Han Jungwoo's name, prompting her invisible trainer to swiftly silence her, coldly commanding her to shut up as he drives the endurance training session to its final, exhausting peak. Outside the door, Chaewon stands completely frozen, blushing furiously as she covers her mouth in absolute, jaw-dropping shock. Listening intently to the training sounds, she is utterly bewildered to realize that the panting, breathy voice coming from the other side of the door belongs to none other than Yang Haina. Her heart hammers against her ribs as she processes the final, shocking clue, realizing with absolute clarity that Haina was indeed calling out Han Jungwoo's name during her intense workout. Standing in the quiet hallway, Chaewon's mind begins to race frantically as she wonders if Han Jungwoo and Yang Haina are actually inside the storage room together. She finds the connection between these two completely proper, unable to comprehend how they could possibly be associated like this. Frozen in place, with her hand tightly covering her mouth, the flustered team leader stands outside the gray door in absolute, wide-eyed disbelief. Meanwhile, right on the other side of the thin door, the high-intensity conditioning session continues at full force, with the oblivious Jungwoo relentlessly driving the self-training routine, while Haina endures the demanding toll of the full-body training sesh. Chaewon's shock turns into pure bewilderment as she desperately wonders what on earth they could possibly be doing in there during office hours. Standing outside the storage room, team leader Song Chaewon is left utterly flustered as she listens to the highly training sounds of a grueling workplace conditioning session echoing through the thin door. Suddenly, a sharp, distinct sound cuts through the air, causing the startled Jungwoo to instantly freeze and flinch in surprise as he realizes their privacy might be compromised. The unexpected interruption catches everyone off guard, and inside the dim room, the chaotic fitness conditioning quickly grinds to a halt. Deciding to investigate, a deeply unsettled Chaewon slides open the storage door and steps inside the room, only to find the area quiet as she looks around the metal shelves in confusion, wondering where on earth the two of them could have vanished to. Just as she is scanning the boxes, Jungwoo suddenly materializes before her, politely addressing her as team leader and calmly asking what exactly she is doing there. Startled by his sudden presence, a flustered Chaewon murmurs his name and directly asks if Haina was just in here with him. Right on cue, a flushed and slightly disheveled Haina peeks out from behind Jungwoo's shoulder, innocently asking the superior if she was looking for her. To keep up their facade and hide her exhaustion, Haina presses her body closely to the wall, catching the clueless dumbass completely off guard as he freezes under the sudden contact. A deeply embarrassed Chaewon stammers that she wasn't really looking for them, but she quickly points out that she could clearly hear Haina's loud voice all the way from the outside corridor. Pointing out the obvious evidence of their workout activity, Chaewon directly demands to know what exactly they were doing inside the dark room during office hours, leaving the cornered duo to stand in tense silence as they desperately try to salvage the situation. To save them from an incredibly awkward situation, the quick-thinking Haina immediately speaks up with a clever excuse, explaining that she felt like she was scolding Jungwoo in front of their colleagues far too often lately, so she decided it would be better to lecture him privately in the storage room instead. She lets out a nervous chuckle, playing off her loud shouts by admitting she simply got way too carried away during her passionate scolding session. Hearing this bizarre explanation, team leader Seo Miju massages her temples in mild annoyance and exhaustion, reluctantly accepting the excuse and dryly asking if that is really the case. Standing nearby, our easily flustered protagonist lets out a quiet sigh of relief, mentally praising Haina for her brilliant quick thinking and realizing that they were incredibly close to getting caught in a total disaster due to their terrible timing. Trying to steer the conversation completely away from their sussy activity, Haina politely changes the subject, asking the team leader if she was looking for something in the storage room. Miju explains that she simply came by because the office printer had run out of ink, prompting Jungwoo to quickly volunteer to take care of the chore himself to earn some easy points. While Haina encourages him to handle it, Miju suddenly interjects, firmly stating that the manager should help her as well. When a surprised Haina wonders why she needs to get involved, Miju crosses her arms and points out that the two of them have seemed remarkably close lately, adding that she actually had something important to discuss with both of them anyway. Instructing them to follow her to her office for a formal discussion, Miju leaves both of her subordinates feeling deeply unsettled. Shortly after, Jungwoo and Haina stand nervously before the team leader's desk, watching as she sits comfortably, with her legs crossed and a serious expression on her face. Jungwoo's mind frantically races as he desperately wonders if Miju is still highly suspicious of their partnership, questioning why on earth she would summon them both together like this. Breaking the tense silence, Haina politely asks why she wanted to speak with them, prompting the formidable boss to open her folder and retrieve a fresh set of documents. To their absolute shock, Miju calmly announces that she is assigning them a joint project. Looking at the paperwork with wide, horrified eyes, a deeply frustrated Haina can only stare in disbelief, silently questioning why on earth she has to work on a major corporate project side by side with this low-ranking dumbass. In her office, team leader Seo Miju continues to smirk at the two of them, reminding Haina that she was the one who voluntarily chose to become Jungwoo's personal mentor, and pointing out that since they seem so close anyway, this joint project is the perfect fit. Miju coolly explains that it is high time Jungwoo started pulling his own weight around the department, framing the difficult assignment as a wonderful opportunity for the young man to finally grow in his career. With a smug, mocking smile, she dismisses them, telling both of them to do their absolute best on the project. As the clock on the office wall ticks late into the evening, a thoroughly exhausted Haina lets out a heavy groan of pure frustration, sitting back in her chair and silently cursing the team leader for picking her for this nightmare assignment. She bitterly resents being saddled with this low-ranking colleague, whom she privately considers a total disgrace. Sitting right next to her, a highly irritated Jungwoo types furiously on his laptop, sternly telling her to shut up and focus so they can finally finish the work and go home. Resting her chin on her hand, a highly annoyed Haina complains that if the team leader was going to dump extra work on them, she should have at least given them something actually worth doing. She sighs that they are essentially just cleaning up Team 1's discarded garbage before turning her hostility back onto Jungwoo, condescendingly asking how he can still be so clueless about basic tasks after working at the company for several months. Jungwoo's blood boils with rage, and he sharply shoots back that if anyone in this toxic office had actually bothered to train or teach him a single thing, he wouldn't be struggling right now. Enjoying his frustration, the deceptive woman lets out a malicious chuckle, mockingly reminding him that she forgot he is just a pathetic outcast, before teasingly asking if he wants her to explain it to him. Grinding his teeth in absolute irritation, Jungwoo retorts that her obnoxious behavior is seriously making him want to utilize his special invisibility powers to silence her right then and there. Attempting to lower his guard, Haina suddenly changes the subject to share some juicy corporate gossip, asking if he is aware that Team 1's formidable leader, Song Chae-won, is about to get promoted to associate director. After Jungwoo quietly confirms that he already knows, Haina sneers that, although it is technically far too soon for such a promotion, it is only natural since Chae-won is the company chairman's wealthy daughter. She leans in to explain the dark reality of the situation, revealing that because the chairman felt a direct promotion would look suspicious, he actively rigged the corporate projects to grant his daughter an artificial achievement worthy of the new title. To Jungwoo's absolute shock, Haina reveals that even the corrupt department head got directly involved in the scheme, and in the process, a highly valuable proposal originally created by their own Team 3 was completely stolen and handed directly to Team 1 on a silver platter. Continuing her explanation, Haina reveals that in return for stealing their team's hard work, the corporate executives gave Team 3 this useless project as a consolation prize, masking the injustice with the lazy excuse that they were simply trying to reduce their workload. Hearing this, a quiet realization hits Jungwoo as he finally understands the source of the bizarre, crackling tension between Seo Miju and Song Chae-won. Haina confirms his suspicions, adding that Miju takes immense pride in her professional capabilities and feels deeply bitter because Chae-won essentially stole the high-ranking promotion that rightfully should have been hers one day. Smiling smugly, Haina points a teasing finger and mockingly asks our protagonist if he finally understands why their hostile boss absolutely despises special, unjust corporate hires, playfully targeting Jungwoo's own background as a high school graduate hired through a special program. Jungwoo can only stare back in deadpan silence, quietly realizing that his petty boss was simply taking out her massive professional frustration directly on him. Haina sighs heavily, calling the entire corporate structure completely messed up before leaning in to make a highly sussy suggestion. She casually asks why Jungwoo doesn't simply use his special invisible powers on team leader Seo Miju to somehow force her to take this exhausting project away from them. When a sweating Jungwoo flatly dismisses the idea as completely impossible, Haina merely scoffs under her breath, playfully calling him completely useless. Deciding they have wasted far too much time gossiping, Jungwoo turns his laptop screen around, telling her to stop talking and review his work so they can finally head home for the night. Looking closely at the screen, a pleasantly surprised Haina is forced to admit that this dumbass actually did a surprisingly good job organizing the files, jokingly adding that her loud yelling must have been highly effective after all. While a proud Jungwoo smiles at the rare praise, his brief moment of victory is instantly crushed when Haina casually notes that some of the critical data is actually incorrect. Stuttering in absolute shock, Jungwoo protests that there is no way he made a mistake since he personally checked every single detail, but Haina calmly points out that the original source files themselves appear to be wrong, suggesting they were given the incorrect database from the very beginning. Checking her smartphone, she calmly orders Jungwoo to head straight over to Team 1's vacant office, explaining that she has already messaged a colleague over there so Jungwoo can use his computer to retrieve the correct database. A completely panicked Jungwoo shouts in disbelief, questioning if she seriously expects him to sneak into a rival department's office at this ungodly hour. When he desperately tries to suggest that waiting until tomorrow morning would be a far better option, a smug and mocking Haina simply smiles, making it clear that he has no choice but to execute her demands immediately. Haina bluntly drives her point home, teasingly suggesting that if he refuses to go tonight, he can simply go tell team leader Seo Miju tomorrow morning that he decided to just pack up and go home the moment he discovered the data was wrong. Left completely speechless by her cold logic, Jungwoo can only sweat in silent dread, realizing he has absolutely no choice but to comply. Walking down the dimly lit, empty corridors of the office building, Jungwoo reflects on how highly frowned upon it is for a regular, rank-and-file employee to sneak into another department's workspace late at night. However, he comforts himself with the thought that he technically has Haina's permission, and in the absolute worst-case scenario, he can always activate his special outsider mode to turn completely invisible and escape undetected. Arriving at the entrance of Team 1's dark, quiet office, Jungwoo carefully pushes the door open with a quiet creak, politely whispering an apology for the late-night intrusion. Stepping into the pitch-black workspace, he notes that everyone has indeed gone home for the night, actively searching the dark cubicles as he recalls Haina's specific instructions to find the third computer desk from the window. As he navigates the dark office, he can't help but feel highly irritated, questioning why that deceptive woman made him do this dangerous task when she could have easily done it herself, bitterly thinking to himself that she is constantly ordering him around like a tyrant. Clenching his teeth in pure frustration, our protagonist vows that the moment this painful joint project is finally finished, he will make her pay dearly with another highly intensive, relentless conditioning session. Sitting down at the designated computer, Jungwoo quickly boots up the monitor and begins typing on the keyboard, hoping to retrieve the correct database files as fast as possible. But his tense focus is suddenly shattered by the loud, metallic click of the main office door, swinging wide open. Jumping in absolute shock, a sweating Jungwoo turns around to see a prominent silhouette stepping into the brightly illuminated doorway. As the figure marches confidently into the dark room wearing an elegant trench coat over a stylish outfit, Jungwoo's heart drops into his stomach as he instantly recognizes none other than team leader Song Chae-won. Panicking in the dark, he realizes that of all the people at the company, she is the absolute last person he wanted to run into, especially since they are already on incredibly thin ice after their highly awkward rooftop encounter. Desperate to avoid a total disaster, this lucky dumbass quickly ducks down, crouching behind a nearby cubicle wall to hide from her line of sight, while frantically trying to figure out how he can safely retrieve the data and escape without getting caught red-handed. Crouching behind the cubicle wall, Jungwoo carefully peeks over the edge, holding his breath as the distinct, sharp clicking of high heels echoes closer and closer through the quiet workspace. He watches team leader Song Chae-won closely as she steps further into the room, thoroughly confused as to why on earth she is wandering around her dark department without bothering to turn on any of the office lights. But his curiosity quickly turns into absolute shock as he notices her face is incredibly flushed, covered in a light sweat as she lets out soft, breathy gasps in the dark. Suddenly, right before his disbelieving eyes, Chae-won initiates a forearm training session. To Jungwoo's utter bewilderment, the elegant team leader slowly undoes the belt of her trench coat, parting the fabric to reveal a highly thick black jacket underneath as she shivers under the sheer intensity of her solo forearm training session. Our poor, cornered protagonist stands completely frozen, his mind spinning in absolute chaos as he frantically questions what on earth is happening and why the pristine, highly proper team leader is performing such a session right in the middle of her department's office. Watching team leader Song Chae-won's unexpected workout, Jungwoo is utterly transfixed, quietly admitting to himself that despite the sheer danger of the situation, he simply cannot tear his eyes away from the spectacle. However, his thrilling distraction is suddenly shattered by a sharp gasp as the distinct clicking of high heels approaches from the hallway outside. It turns out to be none other than young Haina, who is walking down the corridor in a highly irritated mood, complaining to herself about how incredibly slow Jungwoo is and grumbling that this is precisely why she should never offer him a single compliment. Reaching out to grab the door handle, she slides the door open with a heavy thud, calling out Jungwoo's name into the dark room and causing our startled protagonist to turn absolutely pale with sheer panic. Stepping into the dark office, a thoroughly annoyed Haena demands to know if he is still not finished with his simple task, slowly starting to scan her surroundings. Realizing that Song Chae-won is still fully visible behind the cubicles, a panicked Jungwoo realizes with absolute horror that if Haena turns her head even a fraction of an inch, their rival team leader's secret self-training routine will be completely exposed. Desperate to prevent a catastrophic workplace scandal, our frantic protagonist makes a split-second decision and lunges forward, tackling Haena with a sudden, forceful crash. Haena lets out a terrified shriek as they collide, tumbling backward and crashing heavily onto the hard office floor. Sprawled out on her back, a thoroughly dazed and aching Haena rubs her sore back, furiously demanding to know what on earth he is doing and why he just ran into her like a complete madman. Red-faced and sweating profusely, Jungwoo quickly stammers out an apology, hovering over her as he nervously explains that he was simply rushing to head back to their department and absolutely didn't mean to bump into her. Helping her sit up, he politely asks if she is all right and offers to assist her back to her feet, trying his absolute best to project a calm and friendly front. However, his nervous alibi does absolutely nothing to convince the sharp-witted woman, who glares up at him with intense, narrow eyes, flatly declaring that he is acting incredibly suspicious tonight and directly questioning if he was secretly doing something highly weird and sussy inside the dark office before she arrived. Trying to play innocent, Jungwoo acts highly offended by her wild accusations, asking what exactly she takes him for. He gently places his hands on her waist, guiding her out of Team 1's dark department, while telling her there is absolutely no need to push herself after such a hard fall. Although a grumbling Haena barks at him to let go and insists she can walk perfectly fine on her own, Jungwoo quietly celebrates managing to avoid the absolute worst outcome. However, as they walk away, a wave of deep anxiety washes over our protagonist as he questions whether he truly avoided a disaster, nervously wondering what on earth is going to happen to his career now that team leader Song Chae-won knows his secret. Left behind in the pitch-black office, a shivering and deeply flustered Song Chae-won crouches on the floor, desperately clutching her coat around her. Sweating profusely, her mind races with absolute horror as the terrible reality fully sinks in, realizing that she has indeed been caught red-handed. She frantically questions if Han Jungwoo was hiding in the dark office right from the very beginning, feeling utterly devastated as she silently repeats his name in the shadows of the empty workspace. The scene transitions to later that night, showing a grand, luxury apartment high-rise, bathed in the quiet moonlight. Inside her elegant home, a beautiful wedding photo of Song Chae-won and her husband hangs proudly on the wall, casting a sharp contrast to her currently troubled mind. Dressed in a fat, thick jacket, Chae-won sits quietly at the kitchen counter, taking a slow, heavy sip of her drink to calm her racing thoughts. Her quiet evening is suddenly interrupted by the sound of footsteps as her husband Gyunam arrives home, loosening his dark tie as he warmly asks what she is still doing awake at this late hour. Turning to face her partner, a distracted Chae-won simply sighs and softly calls his name. Continuing her conversation with her husband, Song Chae-won admits that she simply didn't realize how late it had gotten because she was deeply engrossed thinking about a work-related matter. As Gyunam wears his suit jacket off, he curiously asks if the work problem is something serious. Chae-won quickly plasters a warm, reassuring smile on her face and dismisses his concerns, claiming that it is nothing at all and is actually quite easily controlled. However, her internal thoughts are far less casual, as she arrogantly reflects that her opponent is truly a complete nobody who poses absolutely no threat to her. Wearing his shirt, Gyunam sighs and notes that she has been coming home exceptionally late lately, making it quite difficult to even see her face. He explains that his own corporate meeting with a buyer ran incredibly long, leaving him completely exhausted as he tells her he is going to take a shower first and suggests she head to bed. But before he can step away, Chae-won suddenly reaches out and grabs his bag, catching him completely off guard. Looking at her husband with a smile, she suggestively asks if he wants her to slice the onions, playfully reminding him that they used to do it all the time, and pointing out that it has been far too long since they last shared an onion slicing session. However, her invitation is met with a rather cold response, as a visibly uncomfortable Gyunam stammers out his refusal, claiming that he is simply far too tired tonight and suggesting they postpone their routine until next time. Shrugging her hand off, he walks away toward the bathroom, leaving a thoroughly disappointed Chae-won standing alone in the kitchen. Although she manages to maintain a polite facade and quietly agrees to wait until next time, her tight expression reveals a deep, building frustration over her husband's constant distance. The scene opens with team leader Seo Miju standing on the rooftop balcony, looking absolutely exasperated as she asks Yang Haina and Han Jungwoo if they are actually kidding her right now. Standing before their formidable boss, the two subordinates can only wait for the storm to hit. Miju glares at them, demanding to know if they seriously call their latest draft a proper report, highly irritated by their clear lack of progress. Pointing out their careless mistakes, she sharply questions how they could fail to input even the most basic data correctly. Sweating profusely under her superior's intense gaze, a highly flustered Haina attempts to offer a weak apology. She quickly tries to shift the blame to save her own skin, explaining that the missing data was precisely why she had instructed Jungwoo to sneak into Team 1's dark office the night before to retrieve the correct database. However, Miju is absolutely not buying her excuses and coldly shuts her down, telling her to stop making pathetic deflections. Miju sternly lectures Haina, pointing out that she easily could have edited the document using the original sources available. She directly accuses Haina of having an incredibly naive thought process, assuming she could simply half-ass the assignment just because she privately looked down on it as a useless garbage project. Completely cornered and humiliated, the backstabbing snake can only stand in stunned silence, sweating as her boss's sharp words hit their mark. Feeling the immense pressure, a desperate Haina quietly reaches out to grab Jungwoo's arm, silently pleading for her junior colleague to help her salvage the situation. Fortunately for this dumbass, Jungwoo decides to take charge. He confidently steps forward and hands a fresh blue folder directly to their team leader, catching Miju completely off guard as she curiously asks what he is giving her. With a calm and composed expression, Jungwoo explains that the folder contains the newly edited version of the report, complete with the absolute latest data. He politely mentions that he filed the report again early that morning, but notes that it seems the team leader simply hadn't had a chance to review it yet. While Miju stares at him in surprise, Jungwoo secretly reflects on how chaotic his night had been, thinking to himself that, although things certainly went awry in the middle, he still pulled an all-nighter doing whatever was necessary to finish the job. Miju opens the folder and quietly reviews the contents. After a brief silence, her strict expression softens slightly as she admits that the work is actually fine, even acknowledging that the quality is much better than she originally expected. Hearing this rare praise, a relieved Jungwoo silently thanks God, while a thoroughly stunned Haina stands beside him in complete, wide-eyed disbelief. Closing the folder, Miju lets out a heavy sigh and explains that she is not being so strict, simply because she has a personal grudge against the two of them. She reveals that during the recent team leader meeting, there was a serious discussion about officially reviving this specific project. As Jungwoo looks on in surprise, Miju reflects on the high-stakes executive meeting. She recalls how, when she announced to the board that she had entrusted the critical project to her two subordinates, she had to defend her team's capabilities in front of the entire department's leadership. Continuing her explanation, team leader Seo Miju recalls how team leader Song Chae-won had actively pushed to support the project during the leadership meeting. Chae-won had pointedly argued that it was simply too cruel to continuously dump dead-end, useless projects onto Team 3 alone. Hearing this, Miju had immediately tried to intervene, suggesting that if they wanted to pursue the project on such a massive scale, she should take charge of it personally instead of handing it to Haina or Jungwoo. However, Chae-won had quickly shut her down with a smug smile, crossing her legs under the conference table as she insisted that they leave the entire assignment to the two junior colleagues. Returning to the present conversation on the rooftop, Miju explains that the sales department has decided to invest significant resources into the project as well. However, because the plans were altered so suddenly at the executive level, their deadlines have now become incredibly tight. Hearing the shocking news, a sweating Haina can only gasp in disbelief. Rather than offering any sympathy, Miju coldly orders them to simply grit their teeth and succeed, declaring that this challenging assignment is going to be the ultimate test of their professional abilities. With that final warning, she turns on her heel and walks away, the sharp clicking of her high heels echoing as she leaves her subordinates behind. Left standing on the rooftop, Jungwoo nervously swallows his saliva as a terrifying realization suddenly hits him. He realizes with absolute certainty that this entire situation is actually a targeted attack aimed directly at him. His mind flashes back to the memory of Song Chae-won's calculating, confident smile. This clever protagonist realizes that Chae-won has absolutely no intention of letting him off the hook after he caught her red-handed in the dark office, and she is likely using this high-stakes, career-threatening project as a way to quietly get rid of him once and for all. As Jungwoo panics over how his rival team leader plans to destroy his career, Haina suddenly breaks the silence, calling out his name. Looking unusually serious, she admits that she has absolutely no idea why things have taken such a sudden and bizarre turn. However, she points out the harsh reality that if the two of them want to protect their careers and keep their jobs, they have no choice but to make this difficult joint project succeed at all costs. Stepping closer to him, she proposes a temporary truce, directly asking how he feels about genuinely working together as partners for the time being.